Welcome back to another FPL deadline stream, this time out of Gameweek 23, and I haven't made my transfer yet. That's been a common theme in the last couple, but there is the possibility of using my only free transfer and bolstering my squad for the upcoming deadline, which is in just over 1 hour and 50 minutes. I'll also be talking about FPL Challenge, injury updates, team news, predicted lineups, clean sheet odds, which are slightly updated from what I talked about in my recent videos, and the same goes for the top 10 captains. So let's keep the conversation going. Let me know your thoughts in the live chat as always, and engage with the content. There's the hype button on YouTube. Click the notification bell, subscribe, and also like the video. Yesterday we hit a new goal, 38,000 subscribers, and it's all thanks to your support. And there are many other links in the description. There's my Discord server for FPL and UCL Fantasy updates, and also Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky. Dylan RCM, very easy to join. And if you want to become a patron or channel member, there's a join button on YouTube and patreon.com/FPL Dylan. I'll get straight into your questions first and foremost. And Easy says, should we be worried about Haaland not scoring in 8 matches now? He has an upside down performance at the moment. Yeah, so 1 goal in 8 games, and that was from a penalty. He has been in terrible form. I think it's his worst ever run in senior football, but I would back him to score against Wolves if he starts. And it would not completely surprise me to see Marmoush lead the line there, and it is only a matter of time before Haaland gets that much needed rest. But in my predicted lineup, a bit of a spoiler alert, I do have Haaland in there. The same goes for O'Reilly, but there is definitely a case for the likes of Nuri and Marmoush to start against Wolves today. Doesn't matter if City score a couple of goals versus Wolves if Haaland is not scoring or assisting, because any City attacker can score. I think the proportion is still quite heavy, so Erling Haaland scores the bulk of their goals, but it's not as reliant on him as it was at the beginning of the season, where if Haaland didn't score, Man City would typically lose the game and they wouldn't even score a single goal. So it has been more balanced in the last couple of months, but Erling Haaland has been in horrific form recently over the last 8 matches in particular. But I think he will get back to scoring ways, and I think he is still the standout captaincy option on paper, but I would not blame you at all if you decided to go for Igor Thiago, Antoine Semenyo. They're definitely showing much better form than Haaland right now, and many players are. Also, Wolves showing some improvements and not losing yet in 2026. Even towards the end of last year, they were putting in some decent performances against Arsenal, for example, where they were a bit unfortunate, to say the least, to not pick up a point. So Wolves have certainly improved, and even when they were losing 9 games in a row, they weren't really getting battered most of the time. A lot of them were narrow defeats, and I pointed this out at the time, but yeah, their recent form has been slightly surprising and also impressive, so hopefully it makes the relegation battle more interesting. James Klein says, hello Dylan, swap Foden for Semenyo or Enzo. Semenyo is a bit more promising this week. Enzo Fernandez offers better value in the long run, and they're both solid FPL options, but if I was buying right now, I'd lean towards Antoine Semenyo. Easy says, I think Semenyo gets 90 minutes because he wasn't included in the Champions League squad. Yeah, he was never going to play match day 7 or 8, but he will be available for the knockout stages. I think Foden is at risk of being benched. A lot of predicted lineups don't have Foden in there, and City will be quite difficult, I think, to nail on when it comes to their starting 11. Cylindra says, hey Dylan, I've got free transfers and 0.3 in the bank. I've got free transfers option. First, sell Foden to Rice and start Anderson. Second, sell Foden and Keane to Rice and Chalobah and bench Anderson. I'd go for, out of those two anyway, option 2, but your third choice is roll to start Foden and Anderson and sort the team next week. I'd say number 2, but that's with the assumption that Foden is benched, and that isn't set in stone, even though many predicted lineups would point towards the likelihood of it happening. So Sam says, hi Dylan, think you know my team by now. Should I roll or do 1 free transfer? Doesn't feel good with Chow upcoming fixtures. Well, just to be completely frank, I know we spoke yesterday in the comments section, but yeah, there are a lot of teams, so it all becomes a little bit of a blur. But from what I remember, you were quite keen on wildcarding, and you talked about making multiple changes, but I don't think you need to wildcard, and there is a bigger upside to saving it for later in the season with all the doubles and blanks. We might even get a double game week in 26, where Arsenal, for example, would have 2 fixtures within the same game week. Is Chow to Chalobah / Gay, Michele or Alderete? Out of all of those options, I think Chalobah's the most exciting or the most secure, because Chelsea are top of the FDR for the next 5 game weeks. He is second for FPL points, only behind Gabriel Magalhaes. Mark Gay would be a decent acquisition, but if you are really keen on selling Chow, it would be for Chalobah. Bruno Guimaraes to Semenyo or Foden to Semenyo worth a hit? I'd rather sell Foden, but for a hit, I would only do this if you are very confident of Semenyo starting, which I am. But with Foden, you have to be convinced that he's benched. Otherwise, it's not worth the hit this week. Krupi, a good backup if Bruno Guimaraes doesn't play, or should I start him? It's versus Liverpool, but I think Bournemouth can score. Yeah, I've gone for 2-2 in my predicted scoreline. I'll also show you those later on. They're always in highest gear first half and maybe get something out of it. Well, I'm going to show you a updated wildcard squad because a lot of price changes happened and I also want to make it a bit more accessible to people. But I think with Bruno Guimaraes, he was talked about in my recent video and I'd still start him in a lot of scenarios. Not every single one of them though, but over Krupi Jr., yeah, I think Bruno Guimaraes would be the preference. If I do Chow to Mukiele or Alderete, I can do Foden to Bruno Fernandes for free next game week. I may take a hit if Bruno Guimaraes is out for Semenyo as well. I don't think you're going to get confirmation of Bruno Guimaraes missing out this weekend or not, and he will be available very soon. If not for the Aston Villa game, it will be for the other one. Now, I talked about the likelihood of Bruno Guimaraes starting. I am less convinced about that after seeing even more predicted lineups and sources which all point towards Miley starting in the midfield and Trippier at right back, but I still think Bruno Guimaraes is worth holding in the long term, but I get why you're talking about this. I would only go to Mukiele or Alderete if you don't have another 4 million defender per se. And Mukiele is now 4.5. It's worth noting that he went up in price overnight, but Foden to Bruno Fernandes is the perfect replacement in Gameweek 24. But in terms of timing, I'd probably keep Foden for one more week in that scenario. So we've got a lot of questions coming in, and let's go for the super chat first. Afterwards, I'll go for the member questions and comments, and then the rest in order of submission. Anish says, hey Dylan, Kelleher, Gabriel, Timber, Chalobah, Semenyo, Rogers, Bruno Fernandes, Rice, Enzo, Haaland, Thiago, with Rufs, Mukiele, Krupi and Frimpong on the bench. 1 free transfer and 1.9 in the bank. Looks fairly solid, and I do agree with virtually everything you've gone for. Even Kelleher over Rufs this week. And with the starting 11, no complaints from me. You do have a clash between Bruno Fernandes and a double up in the Arsenal defence, but it's even feasible that all of them return at the same time, where the defenders get DEFCON. Bruno Fernandes has so many routes to points, of course, but it's looking pretty good. I don't think you need to make a transfer, I'll be honest with you. In terms of the future, though, to kind of highlight areas where you could improve, I think the defensive line is sound. Even the 2 goalkeepers, I think that's fine. There might be some frustrations there with rotation, but there you go. The midfield is interesting because you've got some of the best options in the game, but there are still a few others that might enter your thinking. But I think you're pretty well set for now. So it's really just your bench players that I'd be looking at and possibly considering a change or two. And I think Frimpong out would be the standout, maybe to Tarkowski, and you could start him this week if you wanted to make a transfer now, but I don't think it's absolutely necessary. But I think Frimpong would be the weak link in your 50-man squad. The rest is looking good for the time being, but things can change very quickly. Rogers could go down in price tonight, and I think there will be a push towards selling him if he doesn't return against Newcastle. So that's something else you might want to bear in mind. But I think for now, Frimpong is your only concern. Hi Dylan, start Bruno Guimaraes or O'Reilly? I would start O'Reilly, but it wouldn't surprise me if Aït-Nouri started. Now, in my predicted 11, I've got O'Reilly and Haaland in the lineup, so it's worth mentioning that. Doubling up on Chelsea's defence, probably not, because after the next 5, they've got some tough fixtures, and Sanchez, Chalobah, and Reece James are all good FPL options in their own right, but I think a double up would be a tad too much there. I'd rather double up on Arsenal, and with Chelsea, just have one. I don't think double up is really worth it. Sam says, wildcard from Gameweek 24, a good idea if I roll until Gameweek 30 plus weeks. Dubravka, Sanchez, Klein, Lacroix, Chow, Gabriel, Timber, Wilson, Rogers, Foden, Bruno Guimaraes, Saka, Haaland, Krupi Jr., Thiago. Well, a wildcard a little bit later would be ideal, of course, but yeah, in 24 it could work. It's just, every situation is different, right? And there will be others watching who have so many files to put out, and I would recommend a wildcard in that situation. But for you, maybe we'll have a different opinion on this because, look, I think the likes of Klein, Lacroix are sellable, and on a wildcard I wouldn't go for them. but I don't see too many except for Foden that I think, wow, you probably should sell them in the next couple of weeks and ideally by Game Week 24. So I would say save it for later in the season. Welcome, Baraf. I talked about Bruno Guimaraes in my best wildcard squad yesterday, and he hasn't been officially ruled out, but he is still yellow flagged and doubtful. Eddie Howe said that they're going to wait and see, and that Bruno Guimaraes will do everything possible to be available. But in my predicted lineup now, I've got Lewis Miley starting in the midfield, but Bruno Guimaraes could still be in the squad. I just wouldn't be counting on him as a starter in that crucial fixture. Is Neto a good differential Chelsea asset instead of Enzo? Well, he has been fairly productive this season with the goals and the assists, but Enzo Fernandez is still the clear preference for me, and he's cheaper, which really helps. Start Bruno Guimaraes or Anderson? I'd start Bruno Guimaraes, but depends. If that's Elliot Anderson, that would maybe pique my interest a little bit, but you're only looking at 4 points really from him. I think Bruno Guimaraes' ceiling is far higher. Is Munoz a good pick? Well, Crystal Palace are winless in 10 matches. They're not keeping clean sheets at all because they've lost the vast majority of those games. And Munoz, I think, will start. I wouldn't guarantee it, but he is in my predicted 11. Yeah. Krupi Jr. or Lacroix as first sub. Lacroix does get DEFCONs, top 3 in FPL of defenders, and 16 last time they faced Chelsea. Yeah, interesting one because I've gone for a high-scoring draw between Bournemouth and Liverpool. Krupi Jr. could certainly be involved if that's the case. So his ceiling will be higher, but Lacroix has a higher baseline score, and you're looking at 3 or 4 points from him, potentially. I'm going to say Krupi Jr. Cyril Footy says, hey Dylan, should I do Nunes to Chalobah this week or next? I don't think Nunes will start. He is still ill, and there's a chance that Lewis will play. I've seen some predicted lineups for City with both Ait-Nouri and O'Reilly, which would be very interesting, but yes, I would buy Chalobah this week. Also, I've been holding on to Dewsbury Hall for his injury. Do you think he will start on Monday? I think the fixture's quite good, but I'm not sure about his minutes. I'm going for Armstrong starting in this position with McNeil and Ndai on the wings. So I don't think Dewsbury Hall starts, but that would be a much-needed boost for Everton. Lager says, hello Dylan, not sure what to do with Matheus Nunes. I have Gabriel, Chalobah, Mukiele and Dorgu already. 1 free transfer, 0.3 in the bank. I think Matheus Nunes is a sell. Even after the Wolves game, there are some tricky matches for Man City like Liverpool and Tottenham. And I just don't think he'll start against his former club today. Even though you could start Gabriel, Chalobah and Mukiele this week, I would be tempted to make a switch. And 0.3 in the bank, that is enough for Tarkowski if I'm not mistaken. I'm going to double check that, but that would be the perfect... I think he just went up in price today. Oh yeah, but Matheus Nunes is 5.5, depending on when you bought him. Yeah, if you bought Nunes at 5.5, go for Tarkowski. I think that'd be a great replacement for him. Just be conscious that you are spending a significant amount of money in the defensive line, but that's something I talked about in the wildcard video yesterday. FPL Kevy says, morning bro, going to be an interesting game week. Oh no, Haaland past 2 game weeks. Last game week captain Verts and it went very well. Best of luck today. The same goes to you, and yeah, it would be quite something if you go without Haaland again and he ends up blanking against Wolves. But yeah, he was not going to keep blanking forever, but as long as your alternatives are performing, then you're in a good position. Good morning, Restolen. Good to see you. And also to Mina. Afnan says, start one of Mateta, Lacroix or Wilson. Wilson. FPL manager critics criticise KSI when he went without Haaland in his wildcard, and in the end he's right. I'm not sure when he wildcarded, and FPL is about playing the game your way, right? But yeah, Haaland at the beginning looked unstoppable, and even I said at the time, I just don't see him blanking many times this season, and that was true until December, and all of a sudden his form has dipped dramatically. But football is like that. Even the best goal scorers and players in the world can have dips in form. Hi Dylan, who should I sell for Enzo between Dewsbury Hall or Bruno Guimaraes? I'd rather sell Dewsbury Hall. Bruno Guimaraes is a top quality option for the rest of the season. Good to see you, Gone Home. A question no one ever wanted to ask, play Minter or Goodmanson? Well, both of them are doubtful. With Minter more so in the sense that Hurstler gave a comment yesterday which sort of indicated he won't play the full 90, or he's not ready to do that yet. With Goodmanson, he is a major doubt. I don't think he'll start for Leeds this weekend, so I would start Minter. Foden has a broken hand. Can he play 4 minutes? Well, he played against Bodo Glimt the full 90, so the answer is yes, he can play against Wolves, but I wouldn't count on it, and many predicted lineups don't have Foden in the starting 11. Watkins' minutes reduced. It's possible. Watkins is a streaky player. He went through that purple patch last month, but things have quietened down a little bit. Now, Aston Villa, of course, have lost Daniel Marlin, and they still don't have too many options or depth. We did see Duran at the beginning of last season, so that really impacted Watkins' minutes, but he's still going to be the main starter for them up front, and I'd back him to get the nod against Newcastle again. But in terms of like 90 minutes, I wouldn't count on it either. Yo, Coach Dylan, thank you for that. Appreciate you and your streams. Thank you. I appreciate that as well. Ekitike and Foden, Fernandes and Thiago for a -4, leaves 1.1 in the bank. Long term, I like these moves, and the appeal is getting Thiago now against Nottingham Forest rather than the Aston Villa and Newcastle away games with Arsenal at home over the next 4. But yeah, even with the timing, it's a bit awkward because Bruno Fernandes is facing Arsenal away this week. So what I'd probably suggest is Ekitike to Thiago now and Foden to Fernandes next week. Thank you very much once again. Hi Dylan, I have Foden and Cherki. Should I sell Cherki for Enzo or hold? I think Cherki's more likely to start than Foden this week. Maybe I'm wrong and it's the opposite and Pep Guardiola trolls us all, but yeah, I'd rather sell Foden than Cherki right now. So many things to do, so little transfers to do it with. Yes, if only we had the 5 free transfers now, because back in Gameweek 16, and I wildcarded around that stage, I was thinking, what do I do with my 5 free transfers? And I started using them a bit too carelessly, and I wish I was a bit more cautious back then, and I still had those 4 or 5 moves at my disposal. Should I play bench boost of Dubravka, Watkins, Mukiele, Van der Ven? Looks quite promising, to be fair. So Mukiele away to West Ham, Dubravka facing Tottenham, Van der Ven away to Burnley, Watkins away to Newcastle. I think that's pretty solid, but I'm not sure who you have in your starting 11 to make that bench possible. But assuming that you're happy with it, yeah, I'd go for it. Thoughts on Chalobah against Tarkowski? So over the next 5, Chelsea have slightly better fixtures. They are top of the FDR. I think Tarkowski is very reliable for DEFCON, and Chalobah is definitely a bigger goal threat, especially from set pieces. Tarkowski sometimes gets on the end of chances but doesn't really convert them. I think I'd go for Chalobah, just about. So yeah, Bruno Guimaraes I covered already, so we don't know for sure if he's going to play or not, and all I can really base it off is Eddie Howe's comments after the Champions League victory against PSV Eindhoven, and also yesterday in the Friday press conference, and Bruno Guimaraes is still in contention, but I wouldn't count on it. In my original predicted lineup that I was making for the week, Bruno Guimaraes was in it, but I did see a lot of different sources indicating that Lewis Miley will get the nod. So it all remains to be seen, and I think he will be crucial and much needed against Aston Villa. Mina says, my starting 11, Verbruggen, Gabriel, Timber, Alderete, Foden, Rodgers, Rice, Enzo, Wilson, Haaland captain, Ekitike. The plan is to get Bruno Fernandes for Foden in Gameweek 24. Yep, I think that's going to be a great transfer to make. I wish I bought Bruno Fernandes against Man City last time out, but it is what it is. Your 11 looks sound. Looking at the future or possible players to offload, well, Foden is the main one, as you rightfully highlight. I think Verbruggen would be sort of not a priority, but that is a potential area where you could expand. Brighton still have decent fixtures, and he offers good value at 4.5, but yeah, I think Verbruggen could be upgraded. With the rest, I'm quite happy with it. Ekitike could be sold, and you can get extra funds from that position. So Ekitike to Thiago this week might be in your best interest, and then in the future, you can upgrade somebody else, because if you have Alderete and another 4 million defender, well, that could become Chalobah, especially for Chelsea's promising fixtures from Game Weeks 24 to 27. So that's something else you might want to consider. Welcome, Geotip. Good to see you. Jose Ferreira, good morning to you as well. Let me just get your team up here. So if you haven't done so already, like the video, subscribe. I'm going to go for a few more questions and then go to different graphics, show the FTR and different sort of means, team updates and stuff like that. So, Roofs, Timber, Gabriel, Mukiele, Senesi, Reynildo, Bruno Fernandes, Semenyo, Rice, Wilson, Garner, Thiago, Haaland, captain, Ekitike. Squad depth. Yeah, looks decent. something I'd possibly consider is upgrading one of your defenders, and I think Senesi to Chalobah or Tarkowski would be a good replacement, but I don't know how much money you've got in the bank. But I think one way of achieving that upgrade is downgrading Ekitike. That would definitely spring to mind for me. And you could even upgrade one of Reinildo or Mukiele, and most likely I'd recommend selling Reinildo Mandava. So that's something else you might want to think about. You have the two best goalkeepers in the game right now in Pickford and Rufs, but you're going to have a lot of benching headaches with them. So I would be very cautious about that. You only need one, and Dubravka could be your backup. You start either Pickford or Rufs every single week, with the odd exception here and there when Burnley have a promising fixture, or you might just fancy Dubravka's chances a little bit more. But yeah, that would be my main sort of advice and feedback on your team, especially in the long run. I think Garner's still worth keeping, and you've got a good setup in general. Not many complaints from my end, but those are the areas I'd highlight. -4 for Caicedo or Anderson. Is this so best replacement for Tavernier? So just to make this clear, you're selling Tavernier to one of Caicedo or Anderson for a -4. I'd probably not take a hit and just start a defender or somebody else. It could even be Krupi Jr. against Liverpool. I think that would be better. In terms of the better midfielder to buy, Caicedo or Anderson, probably Anderson right now. Caicedo has dropped off massively in FPL recently. He did score and win player of the match against Paphos in the Champions League, but I think in FPL right now, I'd stick to Anderson. My favourite midfielders at 6 million and below are Wilson and Garner. Players to consider in February. I think that would be a great way to introduce the FDR and talk about that. So let's go to Fantasy Football Hub here. So until Game Week 28, Chelsea are top. Bournemouth, Crystal Palace, Burnley and West Ham are in the top 5. And looking at those near the bottom, Leeds, Wolves, Newcastle, Spurs and Everton, even the likes of Man City, United and Arsenal are in mid-table. So if we're looking at February in particular, we'll go for something like this here. So Bournemouth, Fulham, Palace, Liverpool, Everton would be near the top of the FDR. I think some of their assets would be slightly appealing there. And that's where people would go back to Ekitike. Florian Wirtz is getting a lot of interest. He costs 8.3 million now. I think Daniel Munoz from Palace would be the standout. I wouldn't consider anybody else from the Eagles at the moment. From Bournemouth, Krupi Jr., simply as an 8th attacker and 3rd forward, would be solid. Even Senesi would enter the equation for some people. So that's why timing is so important. And I just recommend it to someone selling Senesi to Chalobah. That looks good for the next 5, but then Bournemouth's fixtures turn for the better. And their fixtures in general aren't too shabby anyway. So that's why it's not really clear-cut. It is quite evenly matched in a lot of these departments. I like analysing fixtures and form, but if I had to push towards one, it's probably form. That is the most important for me. But these are some options for you. Morgan Rogers from Aston Villa, they're ranked quite highly. Even Enzo Fernandez, Parma, and a Chelsea defender would also be on top of the agenda. Wilson from Fulham would be fine. And I think from Everton, it's just Tarkowski. So those are some options for you in February. But that's purely based on the fixtures, not the form necessarily. With predicted points until Game Week 28, Haaland, Fernandez, Gabriel, Rice and Ekitike complete the top 5, with Saka, Mbeumo, Mateta, Thiago and Palmer inside the top 10. With projected price changes, we could see Schade, João Pedro and Rice rise tonight. And if we look at the price fallers, Matheus Nunes, Alien, Foden, Trossard, Rogers, Kamara, who's going to be out for several months. That's a massive blow for Aston Villa. Gvardiol, Hincapié, Cunha, Voltemada, and Diakite, they could all drop. It's worth bearing in mind that for Arsenal, Calafiori and Hincapié were in training, but Calafiori is not expected to be in the squad against Manchester United, but a return is fairly imminent based on the reports. Let's go to a stats comparison of Bruno Fernandes and Mbeumo. They're both worth purchasing, but my clear preference is Bruno Fernandes with more routes to points. He's the first choice penalty taker for Manchester United, and his underlying stats are unbelievable. Even the XG is higher than Mbeumo's, but he has played 2 extra matches. Mbeumo will offer more goal-scoring potential, especially from open play, but then when you factor in the assists, there's only one clear winner for me. Fernandes has 9 assists for the season, 47 shots, And despite having half the shots on target compared to Mbeumo, he has more shots in general. And with shots inside the box, Mbeumo has 34. With the XA, they're both quite promising, and Mbeumo has underperformed when it comes to creativity, with 4 big chances created and 25 key passes. But look at Bruno, 10 big chances, 15 big chances created, and 62 key passes. So for me, Fernandes is probably the best midfielder in the game, and I would buy him in Gameweek 24. And a return against Arsenal is possible, but not probable. And I think it's all about timing. I talked about buying him last week against Man City, and now I would say the same thing. Probably hold off for the Arsenal game and buy Fernandes against Fulham. He missed a penalty against them earlier this season, but he has a great record against Fulham overall. This is the updated wildcard squad, and I made one crucial downgrade in Bruno Guimaraes to Harry Wilson to make this even more affordable to people, and that also allowed me to upgrade Barnes to Krupi Jr. This could also be Mane as well. Rufs and Dubravka as the goalkeepers, Tarkowski, Gabriel and Chalobah in that defensive line. You could even start Jurrien Timber, who is first on the bench against Manchester United, with Bruno Fernandes, Rice, Wilson, Semenyo and Enzo in the midfield. Haaland and Thiago up front, who would be the main captaincy contenders. Alderete and Krupi Jr. complete the bench, and it all depends on your budget, right? So I've got 0.3 in the bank. Mukiele went up in price overnight, so he now costs 4.5. You could buy him instead of Alderete. I don't think it's really worth the extra 0.4 per se, especially if you're not going to start him week in, week out. I think Rufs would already be enough for that Sunderland defensive coverage, but those are some ideas for you on the wildcard and using free transfers. Sam, for example, talked about using that chip right now, so this could offer some solid ideas for him in the next month or two. I'll refer back to FPL Challenge after the deadline, but I've gone for Rufs, Tarkowski, Doku, Mitoma and Saka. Yeah, what am I doing? Well, this week it is called the ball carrier, so +2 points are awarded for every successful dribble past an opponent. Igor Thiago is my captain, but this is not set in stone. I am quite open to making multiple changes in FPL Challenge, but it's good to be different sometimes in this game, and it is quite a lot of fun in terms of playing around with these different permutations, and this week it's all about dribbling and taking on the opponent successfully. So what I'm going to do here is showcase some of my transfer plans, which I talked about in the team selection videos. So let me know your thoughts as always. This is my Gameweek 22 performance, which was pretty horrible, to say the least. Only 2 players in my starting 11 returned in Robert Sanchez and Gabriel Magalhaes. O'Reilly, Anderson, Rodgers, Wilson, Rice, Saka, Ekitike, Haaland and Thiago all blanked, and Haaland has been in horrific form across all competitions. Dubravka and Dalot got 5 pointers on my bench. The other 2 didn't feature whatsoever, and you can see the updated prices on screen. Harry Wilson went up to 6 million overnight, and these are the potential transfers, but more so in Gameweek 24. O'Reilly to Timber and also Saka to Bruno Fernandes. That's the way to triple up on Arsenal with a defensive double up. I have to get rid of Saka to make that happen, and it also allows me to get Bruno Fernandes, and I would still have plenty of money in the bank, but of course O'Reilly to Timber takes up a huge chunk of that, I would say. So this is my provisional team selection for Gameweek 23, and that is with the assumption I roll and save my moves for Gameweek 24. But do you think O'Reilly and Haaland will start against Wolves tonight? I do, but I wouldn't count on it, and Haaland is currently my captain, and Thiago is the vice. The expected points are also updated, so that's all done. And with the scoreline predictions, because you haven't seen them so far, West Ham 1, Sunderland 1, Burnley 1, Tottenham 2, Fulham 2, Brighton 1, Man City 3, Wolves 0, Bournemouth 2, Liverpool 2, Brentford 2, Nottingham Forest 1, Crystal Palace 0, Chelsea 1, Newcastle 2, Aston Villa 1, Arsenal 3, Manchester United 1, and Everton 1, Leeds 0. So next up will be the team weakness and highlighted player for Gameweek 23, and Wolves are back on the agenda despite their recent form, and they might even shock people at the Etihad. But Antoine Semenyo, who went up to 7.7 million overnight, is the suggested player. He is second for FPL points scored amongst midfielders, and these are the updated clean sheet odds. Man City have a 48% probability against Wolves at home. Arsenal, Brentford, Tottenham, Everton and Chelsea complete the top 6. So 2 changes there. So Brentford have risen to 3rd, Tottenham dropped down to 4th, and Chelsea have taken the place of West Ham in 6th spot. Wolves are bottom though with a 10% chance against Man City away. So next up will be the top 10 captains, and after that I'll go briefly, hopefully, through the predicted lineups. But I've got Jarrod Bowen in 10th, facing Sunderland at home. Bruno Fernandes is 9th, despite that tricky visit to the Emirates. Foden, Ekitike and Palmer just miss out on the top 5, which consists of Saka, Cherki, Thiago, Semenyo, and Erling Haaland. But with Foden, by the way, that's with the assumption he starts, and he is not in my predicted lineup. So that is where things get very interesting, and these are the updated versions. Also considering the price changes, I think most of it will be fairly accurate. So for Arsenal, Raya, White, Saliba, Gabriel, and Timber, with Zubimendi, Odegaard, Rice, Saka, Gyökeres, and Trossard, who could go down to 6.8 million tomorrow. For Aston Villa, I've gone for Marco Bizot, Cash, Konsa, Pau Torres, and Maatsen, Bogard and Onana in the midfield, with Rodgers, Tielemans, Buendia, and Ollie Watkins up front. Next up is Bournemouth. Petrovic, Smith, Hill, Senesi, Truffert, Cook, Scott, Jimenez, Krupi Jr., Adley, and Evanussen. Tavernier, who is probably their best midfielder asset, he's going to be out for several weeks due to a hamstring injury. With Brentford, Kelleher, Coyote, Aja, Collins, and Henry, Janel, Yarmoliuk, Jensen, Damsgaard, Schade, and Thiago is very likely. Moving on to Brighton, Verbruggen, Veltman, Van Heck, Dunk, and Kadioglu, with Ayari and Gross in the midfield, Gruder, Jorginho Rota, Mitoma, and Danny Welbeck. Burnley will likely go for a back three: Dubravka, Twanzebe, Esteve, and Humphreys, Ogochukwu and Florentino Luis, Walker and Pires as the wingbacks, Edwards, Anthony, and Broja. We're now on to Chelsea, and this is always difficult to predict, but Sanchez, James, Fofana, Chalobah, Cucurella, Enzo Fernandez, Caicedo, Neto, Palmer, Garnacho, and Joao Pedro is the most likely. Crystal Palace have been easier to predict compared to most this season, and I think Munoz could return into the starting 11 for the first time in over a month, with Henderson, Richards, Lacroix, Lerma, Wharton, Hughes, Mitchell, Johnson, Yeremi Pino, and Jean-Philippe Mateta. Everton have also been fairly reliable with their starting 11s, but they've got two key players back from the African Cup of Nations triumph in Ndai and Idrissa Gana Gueye. Pickford, Patterson, Tarkowski, O'Brien, Mikalenko, Garner, McNeil, Armstrong, and Bowery would be the likely starters alongside the Senegalese champions. With Fulham, Leno, Castagna, Anderson, Bassi, and Robinson, Sandenberg and Iwobi, Wilson, Smith-Rowe, Samuel Chukwueze, and Raul Jimenez. That is my predicted 11. And for Leeds United, we could see several changes. So Darlow would be between the sticks once again. Bogle and Justin as the wing-backs. I don't think Goodmanson will be available. Rodon, Bornau, and Strauch in central defence. Aronson, Ampadu, and Gruev in the midfield. Calvert-Lewin and Okafor up front. The Premier League champions Liverpool could see Robertson join Tottenham Hotspur actually in a £27 million move. I think Kirkers will start against Bournemouth away, his former club. Alisson Becker in goal, Frimpong, Gomez, and Virgil van Dijk. Kanate will be unavailable due to personal reasons. Gravenberch and Szoboszlai in central midfield. Salah, Wirtz, Gakpo, and Ekitike. With Man City, Donnarumma, Lewis, Kusanov, Gay, Anne O'Reilly, Rodri, Semenyo, Cherki, Bernardo Silva, Doku, and Haaland, but several lineups have put Reinders in there, so that's another possibility for the citizens. With Manchester United, Lamens, Dalot, Maguire, Martinez, Shaw, Casemiro, Mainu, Amad Diallo, Bruno Fernandes, Dorgu, and Mbumo is the winning formula from their victory against Manchester City last time out. Moving on to Newcastle United, Pope, Trippier, Chow, Botman, and Hall. My main concern and doubt would be Miley versus Bruno Guimaraes in the midfield. If Bruno is available and ready to start, he will do so alongside Tonali and Joelinton, with Barnes, Visser, and Gordon up front. Nottingham Forest will likely go for Sells, Aina, Milenkovic, and Murillo, who is currently doubtful. Williams, Sangari, Anderson, Dominguez, Gibbs-White, Hudson-Odoi, and Ndoi up front, with Igor Jesus being doubtful. So Sunderland are playing a bit of a hybrid of a 4-2-3-1 and also a back five, but Rufs, Mukiele, Ballard, Alderete, Reinildo, Xhaka, Siddiqui, Hume, Lefay, Mundle, and Brobby is their likely lineup against West Ham. With Tottenham Hotspur, Vicario, Borro, Romero, Van der Ven, Spence, Gallagher, Gray, Odeber, Xavi Simons, Tell, and Colomwani. So I think Xavi Simons had some pain in the Champions League match, but he played through it and he should be available. Paulinho is doubtful, and there are a few concerns there for Tottenham Hotspur when it comes to injuries. So the final two teams include West Ham, with Areola, Wan-Bissaka, Mavropanos, Todibo, Scarles, Soucek, Fernandez, Bowen, Pablo, Somerville, and Dati Castellanos. The final team is Wolves, with Jose Sa, Mosquera, Santiago Bueno, Krejci, João Gomez and Andre, Chichawa and Hugo Bueno, Mane, Tolu, and Hwang Hee-chan. So hopefully all of this has helped you with the FDR being analysed and all these different bits and bobs of FPL with the clean sheet odds and the top 10 captains. I'm now going back to my squad and I'm going to put a poll out, and it's just going to be a simple one. Would you make a transfer in my situation? And we'll see how you vote. I'm also open to making other polls. You can feel free to suggest them in the live chat and we can talk through them and see what the community votes for as well. Yeah, Baraf, it's Bergval who's injured. Archie Gray is available. Okay, so yeah, 1.8 million in the bank. Yeah, so yeah, I think in this case, yeah, Saka to Fernandez. No, I'm not going to do that this week. In game week 24, I think this defensive line, O'Reilly, yeah, Anderson, Klein, and Dallo, those are the weak links in my team. That's for sure. To bolster the defense. Okay, so there you go. Let's go through the questions once again. Yeah, exactly that easy. Andy Robertson to Spurs, a surprising move, but it looks like he could feature for Liverpool or be in the squad for the next couple of matches before departing. Yeah, Garner's still a decent option long term. He's been very consistent, getting 4 points or more in the last 10 game weeks, essentially. So I think that's a solid pick. I don't think he's a priority sell by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah, Gordon to Enzo is a good move, and we could see Gordon go down in price if he hasn't done so already. He might have done, actually, to 7.4 million. But yeah, I think with Anthony Gordon, he's been very inconsistent in the Premier League, but a completely different beast in the Champions League. He's the highest scoring midfielder in UCL Fantasy so far this season, but Enzo Fernandez is an upgrade here. Is Jose Sa starting for Wolves now? Yes, he's been starting for a couple of matches, and is he better than Dubravka on Wildcard? Well, you're right to highlight that because he's 4.2 million. Based on recent form, I think there's a debate to be had for sure, but I just go for Dubravka, and I still don't fully trust Wolves, especially from a defensive perspective. ARX says Sanchez, Gabriel, Timber, O'Reilly, Saka, Wilson, Rogers, Schade, Gordon, Haaland, Thiago, Dubravka, Hall, Achimpong, Barnes, 2 free transfers. What is the weak point? I think the midfield is the weak point, to be quite honest with you. So Sanchez, Gabriel, Timber looks really good. Same goes for Haaland, Thiago. I think Rogers and Wilson are still fine, but I look at the others in Schade, Gordon, potentially Saka, where you could move him to Fernandez in 24. That is what I'd be looking at. So keep Saka for this week against Manchester United, but I'd sell him to Fernandez in 24. O'Reilly is another sell, and that's where you can go to Chalobah, maybe Tarkovsky. That could work as well. And with Schade, I'd sell him to Rice. I think that would look really solid for you. With Anthony Gordon, Enzo Fernandez would be a good replacement, and you have the funds to make all of those moves possible. On your bench as well, I mean, you've got Lewis Hall, which isn't too shabby, but Achimpong and Barnes, yeah, I'd be trying to fix that a little bit. Thank you, Punjabi, for moderating the chat, and yeah, try not to spam so we don't get in the way of other people. Morning, Dylan. Play Bowen or Alderete? I'd play Bowen. West Ham are so unreliable. Despite Bowen's consistency over the years, he hasn't been as promising this season as I would have thought. I have one free transfer right now, says Baraf. I'm rolling. We'll have 2 free transfers to do Foden and Cunha to Bruno Fernandes and Enzo, or Neto next game week. I'd still have Bruno Guimaraes in my team. I think that's fine. Bruno Guimaraes is worth holding on to in the long term, as I talked about, and he could still make it against Aston Villa. I wouldn't be surprised, but that would be one of my major concerns for the Newcastle lineup. Yeah, I think rolling this week makes a lot of sense for many managers. Maybe not everybody, but I think it is definitely plausible. Jamie says, hello, Dylan. Good to see you. Dubravka, Tarkovsky, Dorgu, James O'Reilly, Wilson, Bruno Fernandes, Rice, Enzo, Haaland, Thiago, with Raya, Saka, Calvert-Lewin, and Alderete on the bench. I'd start Saka personally. He has a decent record against United, particularly at the Emirates. And I think his ceiling is higher than most of your attackers this week. But in the future, especially in 24, that's where I would sell him. But you've already got Bruno Fernandes, so that possibly reduces the urgency of selling Saka. You do have a good squad in general, and I think you're doing quite well recently. But yeah, Dubravka starting over Raya. Yeah, you're going all in on Man United, aren't you? No surprises there. Look, personally, I would start Raya over Dubravka. I would bench Dorgu and potentially start... Well, you've got 4 defenders, do you? Yeah. I'd start Saka over Dorgu and potentially Calvert-Lewin. There's even a case to start Calvert-Lewin over O'Reilly, but yeah, that's the main one. Start Saka and Raya over Dorgu and Dubravka, but maybe your Man United cap will prevent you from doing so. But with future transfers, selling Saka would definitely be on radar, and that can give you more funds to make other improvements. Start Dubravka or Henderson? Good question. Probably Dubravka. Hi, Dylan. Who would you bench out of Bowen, Dorgu, or Van de Ven? I'd bench Dorgu. Minter or Foden start? I'd start Foden, even though Minter's more likely to start, and in most lineups I've seen, Minter's in it, but with my prediction, I've gone for Gruder. Maybe I'm wrong. Yo, Dylan from Norway saying hi. Good to see you, Nicole. Hi, 1 free transfer. Gordon to Enzo. What happens to Gordon now that Bruno Guimaraes is out? Well, they don't play in the same position, but Bruno Guimaraes is Newcastle's most important player, and I think that will be a massive blow in a game like this against Aston Villa if he were to miss out, but he is still in contention to play. With Anthony Gordon, he has been terrible in FPL for most of the season, so even with Bruno Guimaraes starting week in, week out, we haven't really seen the best of Gordon in this competition, but it has been a different story in the Champions League. So, yeah, I would sell Gordon to Enzo, and I think both of them changed in price overnight, which isn't ideal for you, but I think Enzo is still a good purchase at this point. Also start Anderson or Krupi Jr. I'd go for Krupi Jr. actually. Start Virgil or Hall. Not really expecting anything from either. Van Dijk is more likely to get DEFCON and to score a goal, but Lewis Hall has more assist threat and a slightly better chance of a clean sheet, dare I say. I'm still going to go for Virgil van Dijk here. So a lot of teams being sent in. I'm going to wildcard in 24. Well, if that's the case, you're in a bit of an awkward spot because Foden would be great this week if he starts, and O'Reilly, but your decision has to be based on your opinion on whether they start or not. And I've personally got Foden on the bench and O'Reilly starting, but it could be the other way around. Even both of them could sit on the bench or both of them start. It's going to be a complete minefield there, but 1 week punt essentially before you wildcard in 24. It's probably going to be Ekitike to Thiago. That is what stands out to me personally, but I think Liverpool-Bournemouth could be high scoring as well. So it's not really a clear-cut one with your team. It's an awkward position to be in. Punjabi puts his team. 1 free transfer and 4.8 in the bank. I have 4 City now. Who to transfer out? Long-term, Foden is the one to sell. And I said this a couple of weeks ago as well. He did very well for me in November and December, but his form has dramatically dipped. So that would be the answer to your question. With your squad, it's looking good, even with Bruno Guimaraes potentially injured. And if you need a cash cow, Ekitike could be the one, and Bruno Fernandes would be at the top of your agenda. You've got a lot of money in the bank, though, so you don't need to sell Ekitike, but I think Thiago would be a great forward acquisition this week, bearing in mind he does face Aston Villa, Newcastle away after Forest, and it's also Arsenal at home over the next 4. But yeah, Bruno Fernandes in 24 would be a great transfer for you, and unfortunately, most people are going to be doing the same thing. Yeah, Jose Ferreira, I did cover your question earlier, I'm not going to lie to you. So that's already been talked about. I mentioned the fact that you've got 2 expensive goalkeepers. You only need one of them, not both. And I also talked about selling one of your defenders, ideally Reinildo Mandava, because Senesi has some good fixtures coming up soon. You might want to keep him, but Bournemouth have just been terrible defensively for quite a while, so I wouldn't mind selling him to Chalobah or, Tarkowski. It's all been covered before. Hey, Dylan, have Cherki, Foden and Haaland, and now Gay, who has gone to City. Yeah, 4 City players. It's going to be Foden again. Now, it's awkward because this week, if you back all of them to start, then keep them. That'd be a massive differential. But going into Gameweek 24, Foden to Fernandes is a very easy transfer to make. If you want to go for something a bit different, that's where we can discuss ideas going into the next deadline. But yeah, Foden is the one to sell long term. So the game will not allow you. Essentially, the next time you make a transfer, you have to sell a City player. That is pretty much guaranteed. It's always been the case because you can only have 3 players, and when a transfer happens, you'll have 4 temporarily, but you can't make any transfers until you sell one of them. Hello, Dylan. This is my team, says Heated Gaming 23. So Raya, Gabriel, Anderson, Michele, Bruno Guimaraes, Rogers, Vert, Semenyo, Haaland, Ekitike, Thiago, with Tarkowski, Rio, Klein on the bench, 2 free transfers, 0.5 in the bank. Yeah, this week is a bit awkward because I think for a lot of people, rolling does make sense, but looking at your squad, I think the defensive line, well, you've got Tarkowski in there. I'd start Tarkowski over Joachim Andersen. That'd be my advice, for sure. With your other players, Fernandes in 24 is the priority. And another midfielder I'd highly suggest is Declan Rice. So that's what I would pretty much be going for. You do have 2 really cheap options on your bench in Rio and Klein. Maybe upgrading one of them would be ideal, but I wouldn't say it's a priority just yet. And if you ever need a cash cow, it's going to be a similar story to a lot of people. I'd probably suggest selling Ekitike there in the future, but not necessarily right now. But yeah, that's my my sort of take on your team, and you're in a good position, but I would consider those moves we just discussed just now. AG2002 says, hey Dylan, my team. Raya, Dubravka, Gabriel, Michele, Reinildo, Anderson, Senesi, Foden, Wilson, Palmer, Gordon, Saka, Haaland, Thiago, Guiu. 2 free transfers, 0 in the bank. Roll or use the move? Probably roll. I think a lot of people are in a similar situation this week, but I get your concern because you've got Foden who might not even start, and I think it's very awkward to have him at this point. But yeah, the best replacement for him would be Bruno Fernandes. At least you've got 2 free transfers. That's good. And I think over the coming weeks, something like Foden to Fernandes, probably Gordon to, or Saka to Rice, and maybe selling Gordon would be on the agenda. So you've only got, well, you've got 3 Arsenal already. Yeah, it's an interesting one there. But I think both Saka and Gordon are sellable over the coming weeks, but not necessarily this week. And I think Saka, for those that have him, I'd keep against United and start. Thank you, Safir. Much appreciated. Hey, Dylan, should I bring in Thiago for Ekitike in order to afford Foden to Bruno? I also have DCL. I would say yes, but both Ekitike and Thiago look promising this week, and I think separating the 2 is... Look, I'd prefer Thiago, but Ekitike hauling against Bournemouth would not surprise me whatsoever. With the Foden to Bruno move, that looks perfect for Gameweek 24, but there are concerns about doing it now, and that's mainly with the assumption that Foden could still start against Wolves. You do have good squad depth there with Calvert-Lewin on the bench too, but I think in your situation, yeah, Thiago and Ekitike, and then buy Bruno Fernandes next week. So 1 transfer now and 1 in 24. If Haaland keeps this underperformance in the next 5 matches, could we sell him to more cheaper options? Well, that's the point, right? if Haaland then goes, let's say, 13 matches with 1 or 2 goals in that time frame, yeah, people just say, oh, sell him, he's a fraud and he's awful and useless. But then we get to that stage and he'll probably start scoring a lot of goals again, because that's when Man City's fixtures ease up as well, and he might have gotten a rest by then. So things change very quickly in football, and selling Haaland always comes with its own risk. So I'm not going to say always keep Haaland, never go against him for the captaincy, and never even consider the possibility of offloading him and doing something different. I'm not saying that, but there's always a risk. And I think if that happened, it would actually encourage me to keep him even more, because people are selling him, his ownership is going down, and I wouldn't say it becomes a differential, but it definitely becomes a more appealing captaincy and option, because I would back him to get back to goal-scoring ways, essentially. Dubravka and both Andersons on my bench, is it worth a bench boost? I'm probably going to say no, because who's your other option? You mentioned 3 players there, but what about the 4th? Baraf says, my team, Dubravka, Sanchez, Tarkowski, Chow, Gabriel, Timber, Rodon, Bruno Guimaraes, Foden, Anderson, Cunha, Rice, Haaland, Bowen, Thiago, 1 free transfer. Any suggestions? More so long-term, once again. So your starting 11 this week would look quite solid. Foden to Bruno Fernandes in 24 is definitely the right move. You've got Cunha there already. I think he's still a sell. That's one transfer I'd maybe make now. Selling Cunha to Enzo Fernandez, and then Foden to Bruno Fernandes next week. Raya or Dubravka? It's going to be Raya. Sell Saka for Bruno in 24, not this week, Ross. Any news on the Man City lineup? Not any news, just my predictions, which comes from a lot of research, but ultimately I don't have inside information when it comes to that. I will have another look now and see what we have, but let's see, is this a reliable source? Okay, I've got... Okay, I'm just going to put this out there. I just saw it on Twitter. I'm not going to guarantee it. I can't really speak to how reliable the source is, but they do have a decent number of followers, to say the least. So I'm going to go to this now. So the page is called Stat City. You can see there they've got 91,000 followers there. They've said Donnarumma, Lewis, Kusanov, Gay, 8 Nuri, O'Reilly, Rodri, Cherki, Doku, Semenyo, Haaland. So that would mean I've got 10 right in my predicted lineup. So I think the main change would be Bernardo benched for O'Reilly, and they're playing all of the fullbacks and inverted midfielders, you know, essentially, and Lewis, 8 Nuri, and O'Reilly. So that's quite interesting. Yeah, that's very interesting. If that is the case. I'm not going to say this is gospel. I'm not telling people to base their decisions off this. But, yeah, that's similar to the predicted lineup I've put out. Just the one change there. And that would be great for me, because I've got O'Reilly and Haaland. I sold Foden last week. And it's just worth putting it out there. I wouldn't take it as gospel, though. And let's see if it ends up being true. So I'm going to go back to my team for now. And to be honest, I think I'm going to stick with this for the time being. But a late change is always possible. You never know with me, that's for sure. But yeah, I would like to roll and have more flexibility in Gameweek 24. And the captaincy is where things could mainly change. I'm going to go through member questions and the super chat next, and then go through the rest in order of submissions. So thank you to Sid. Thinking of Gordon to Semenyo, but need a 4.8 million suggestion for Nico. Also, is Ekitike to Thiago worth the transfer this game week to fund Bruno in 24? Okay, interesting question here. So 4.8 suggestion for Nico. Is that for O'Reilly then? Okay. 4.8 million and below. I mean, Mukiele and Alderete would still enter that equation, albeit they're not ideal. I'd say Michael Keane, because he's back from suspension by then. So I think that's the best defender to replace O'Reilly with at 4.8 and below. Gordon to Semenyo looks good to me. I'd make the move. And Ekitike to Thiago this week, yes. But if you were to do this maybe in 24 to 26, that's when Brentford have poor fixtures on paper. Don't get me wrong, Thiago is fixture-proof. He could score in those matches, but the ceiling will be lower on paper. And there's also Arsenal at home in there. So if you were to do Ekitike to Thiago, do it now. And I think Gordon to Semenyo looks good too. And yeah, it gives you the funds to buy Bruno Fernandes next week. So overall, a really well thought out plan. And the best replacement for Nico O'Reilly is Michael Keane because he's back from suspension in 24. Duarte says Wilson, Foden, Saka, Anderson, Enzo, Ekitike, Thiago, Haaland, bench 1. Haaland should never be in this debate, even with his recent form in mind. But I think from those players, it's going to be Anderson. Now, in virtually every single lineup I've seen, Foden is nowhere to be seen, essentially, in those predicted lineups. And I don't think he'll start either. So there's definitely a case for benching him as well, but it's going to be Anderson for me. Hey Dylan, I have Semenyo, Haaland, O'Reilly, and Gay. Do I play all 4? Yes, I probably would. But in the future, I'd definitely trim that down a little bit. And the next time you make a transfer, you will be forced to sell one of them. And O'Reilly is the clear sell for me. Watkins and Rodgers against Newcastle or Barnes and Chow? Difficult one. What I'd probably say, and this might seem woke, but I would start Rodgers and Barnes at the same time and sort of back a high-scoring game. I think both teams will score in that match. So yeah, that's what I would personally suggest. In terms of favouring Newcastle or Aston Villa, I slightly lean towards Newcastle slightly more with the home advantage. Paredes says start in Dye versus Mukiele or Alderete, or roll and recruit him next week, own Foden. I'd say roll and recruit him next week, but not a bad shout. I think Ndai will start, but there is always an element of risk when a player just comes back from an international tournament and it's different playing for club football and getting used to the rhythm again. He also probably had a few days out partying from the Senegalese African Cup of Nations triumph. On Wildcard, would you go Timber, Gabriel, or Saliba Gabriel? It's going to be the first duo, which I talked about in my Wildcard video. Also earlier in this stream with the updated Wildcard squad. So essentially, Timber or Saliba, it's going to be Timber. Ekitike to Thiago is a yes for me. I still like Ekitike, and I don't think he's a priority sell, which I talked about in my Transits video too. Welcome, Ivan Schneider. Which two would you prefer? O'Reilly, Anderson, Rodgers, and Bruno? Yeah, for this week, it's going to be O'Reilly and... I'm going to go out on a limb here and say Rodgers, but Fernandes is someone you never want to bench, and I'll be the first to admit that. But against Arsenal, that's one of the few fixtures where I would even consider that possibility. Hi, Dylan. Who to start? Wilson or Voltemada? Wilson. I think Visser will start. I think Cherky will start there, Safair. In most, but not all, predicted lineups I've seen, Cherky is in it. But yeah, I just showed you one potential lineup for Man City. I'm not sure how reliable it is, but I think some people do trust the source. We'll wait and see. Morning, Dylan. I sub Rodgers for Mukiele this game. Villa don't look very good without Kamara. Well, he's a very important player for them in the midfield. I think last season when he suffered an injury, they started dropping down the table quite quickly, and we've seen that trend over the last couple of seasons. So he's very important, and I think that's definitely a good point to highlight. So he might not be FPL relevant, but he makes the likes of Rodgers a better FPL asset. But I still think Rodgers has something to offer, but yeah, I wish I bought Bruno Fernandes instead of him, but it is what it is. Hi, Dylan. Do you think Semenyo starts? Yes, I do. Yeah, Geotip has covered before. I wouldn't take a hit for either player, but my preference is Anderson right now. Morning, Adamak. My starting mids were Gordon, Rodgers, Rice, and Semenyo. One free transfer, so I took out Gordon for Bruno Fernandes, thinking of the long term. Makes sense. I think Fernandes is a great replacement. Personally, I would have done it in 24, but also the main reason why I didn't buy Fernandes last week when I wanted to was because of the Arsenal fixture now. And sometimes if you look too much into the fixtures, it prevents you from getting a haul, whether it's unsurprising because of the difficulty of the opponent or for other factors. I think it's very important to just buy the players you want, even if it's a little bit too early for your liking. Hello, Dylan. Wait, I think some of these questions I might have answered, but the chat has refreshed essentially. So I'm just going to go to other questions here. Paulo says, hi, Dylan, start 2, Bruno Guimaraes, Wilson, Dallo, O'Reilly. Wilson and O'Reilly for me. Play O'Reilly or Van Heck? O'Reilly. Vignesh says start 1, Dorgu, O'Reilly, Szoboszlai. Have Gay on my starting 11 too. Close one between Szoboszlai and O'Reilly, but I'd lean towards O'Reilly with the assumption that he starts. Thank you, Rania, for the super chat. Sanchez, Chow, O'Reilly, Van Dijk, Timber, Wilson, Rodgers, Foden, Ekitike, Thiago, Haaland, Dubravka, Gravenberch, Dallo, Tavernier. Free transfers, 0.3 in the bank moves. Yeah, so I think with your squad, and you've got free transfers, which is brilliant, by the way. So Tavernier's a sell. Dallo's a sell for me, despite some good fixtures coming up. What I do now is a defender transfer. You don't have Gabriel. which, look, you don't have to have him, but for me, he's the best defender in the game. So this is slightly risky, but I would sell Foden to Enzo Fernandez. This might be a little bit too clever, but that's one move you could make. Then you can buy Gabriel on your defensive line. And I would sell... Yeah, awkward one. Probably Van Dijk. So Van Dijk to Gabriel. Foden out to Enzo. And then in 24, you can buy Bruno Fernandes whilst keeping your front free if you want to stick with that sort of structure. But I am quite open to selling Ekitike as well to fund moves. But that's something you might want to consider. Now, if you believe Foden will start, that would be a differential for you because most people are selling him now. So that is something else to bear in mind. But I personally don't think he will. And I think that could really help you in 23 and 24 and also in the long term. So that is what I'd probably recommend. But you still have other fives to put out or other potential concerns. I think Gravenberch is fine to keep. He's not a priority sell or anything. But Tavernier, Dalot, they'd be sellable. Especially Tavernier, of course. He's out for a couple of weeks. So let me know your thoughts, Aranya. What are you looking to do at the moment? But I think my top suggestion is to make a transfer this week and bolster your defensive line. Greetings, Rai. I had Gay before his move to City. Now I have Semenyo, Foden, Gay and Haaland. So what would happen is you can start all four of them now and you can continue to do so. But once you make a transfer, you are forced to sell a City player before you can finalize transfers and moves. So that's pretty much what happens when you have four players from the same team. In Die or Enzo for Tavernier or Raw? Enzo Fernandez. Hey Dylan, would you start Senesi or Van Dijk? Thanks for all the content. Thank you very much. I've gone for 2-2 in my prediction. So based on that, I think Senesi is slightly better for DEFCON, but they're both very solid. Van Dijk is more likely to score. Senesi has more assist threat as well. So it's actually quite balanced, but I'm going to say Van Dijk. Just about. If I do Cunha to Enzo, I'd have benching headache then. Who to bench, Chow or Gabriel? Chow would be on the bench for me. Any chance Dewsbury Hall will play today? Yeah, there's a chance, but I think Armstrong will play in his position. Hey Dylan, Pedro, or Joao Pedro or Bowen long term? Long term is probably Bowen. For the next 5, Joao Pedro looks more appealing with Chelsea's fixtures, but there's also the slight rotation risk. And Chelsea will still go quite strong in matchday 8 of the Champions League. There's the Carabao Cup semi-final against Arsenal, so that could also increase the probability of Joao Pedro being rotated. Hi Dylan, any shout on triple captain Haaland? Yeah, there is a shout, but Wolves have been in decent form recently. Man City have been a bit off it with 2 consecutive losses, a couple of draws as well in the Premier League recently. But I do back them to bounce back as well. I think I'm in agreement there. But we've also got double game weeks later in the season where you might want to use the triple captain, but you've also got other chips that you might want to prioritize, like the free hit, wildcard, and particularly the bench boost, which is always ideal to use in a double game week. But yeah, good question. I think Haaland should still be considered now when most people are going off him. The EO will be lower than it usually would be for such a plum fixture on paper. But yeah, I think Haaland will produce bigger returns later in the season. Yeah, Thiago captain is certainly an option. No doubt about it. He's third in my list, just behind Semenyo and Erling Haaland. Start 3 Arsenal defenders or Chalobah in for Timber. I'd start Chalobah and double up on Arsenal. Thank you, Punjabi. Much appreciated. As he says, let's get the likes up. I appreciate all the likes, support, and the subscribers. We did hit 38k yesterday, so thank you very much. Yes, Affair, I think with this one, it's going to be the same story. I'd sell Foden. If you back him to start, then just start all 4 of them now and sell Foden in 24. Okay, so when was the last good leak by StatC? I'm not sure, but people in the replies were suggesting that he has gotten some things right, so we'll wait and see. Thank you, Keith. Also, a big up to you. Morning, Dylan. Is there any chance Dewsbury Hall will start today? Yes, there is a chance, but I don't think he will. Which 2 would you prefer? O'Reilly, Anderson, Rodgers, and Bruno. O'Reilly and, yeah, as covered before, probably Rodgers, but it's never good to bench Bruno Fernandes. Pleasure, Alex. Morning, mate. Been a while. How have you been? Yeah, good. Hopefully you're doing well too. Somebody gave me a membership. Thank you to that person. It probably was Paredes, to be fair, but there's also Ahmed and Ahmad who have been gifting memberships over the years and Napstars, but Yeah, I think recently it's very likely it's going to be Paredes. He's gifted so many. He's done great work for the channel. Josh says, I have 1.3 in the bank. Free transfers, want to get rid of Cunha and Cherki. I think Cherki's a hold for now, at least against Wolves. But yeah, Cunha, I'd sell him. In terms of replacements, you're looking at Bruno Fernandes, who is a massive upgrade. Enzo Fernandez. I would also look at Rice still. I think he'd be the second priority in the midfield, just behind Bruno Fernandes. So those are some options for you. Mateta wants to leave Palace to Villa, rumour. How could that affect FPL picks on him? Well, he's been a non-option for quite a while now. He's had a very poor season. Only a few high moments, like the hat-trick against Bournemouth, of course. But yeah, he's been very frustrating, underperformed, and that would destabilise Crystal Palace even further. But that would definitely cause some rotation there between him and Ollie Watkins in the Aston Villa side if he were to push that move through. But yeah, interesting stuff. We'll see what else happens in January, but there's still another week left for this window. Yeah, FPL Challenge I talked about earlier, I'll refer back to it after the deadline, but for now the focus will be on FPL. Start Kroupy or Anderson. Kroupy. Argent says, I have 12 startable players, don't know who to bench out of Igor Jesus, Szoboszlai, Mukiele, Van der Ven, Gabriel, Riley, Enzo, or sell Foden for a bench piece for flexibility going forward. Well, if you've already got a benching dilemma, selling Foden now won't really help you, but then again, Foden is probably part of those 12 players and you might not back him to start. Based on my opinion, I'd be tempted to sell Foden right now, but the sort of ideal scenario for Foden owners is offloading him for Bruno in 24. So I think in your situation, who to bench, I'd personally say one of Szoboszlai or Mukiele. I think the rest are easily a start there. Igor, I'm guessing, is Igor Thiago, not Igor Julio or Igor Jesus, but yeah, let me know about that one. Sell Foden or Gravenberch? I'd sell Foden. Play Foden or Rodgers? This is the difficult one with Foden, right? If you back him to start, then definitely put him in your lineup, but he's still a sell, especially in 24. Hi, Dylan. Curious on what you think about a triple captain Haaland. Yeah, we covered this earlier. Yeah, thank you very much, Ryan. Dylan, would you play Joachim Andersen or Mukiele this week? As Andersen will hit DEFCON, but clean sheet chances is lower than Mukiele. Well, I think West Ham will score against Sunderland, so probably Andersen in this case. The thing is, Mukiele is also decent for DEFCON, but probably not to the same extent as Joachim Andersen. Foden, Bruno Guimaraes, O'Reilly to Enzo, Semenyo, Timber. Long term, that looks solid, but I think O'Reilly will start, so the timing might be a bit awkward. I think City have a better chance for a clean sheet than Arsenal in 23, but long term, it looks really good. Now, bear in mind that Bruno Guimaraes will be available soon. If not this week, it will be in 24. And do I see him to Enzo as an upgrade? Not necessarily, but the yellow flag is probably the main reason why you're thinking of that. One for All says, I have Matheus Nunes and Foden in my first 11. Having Mukiele and Chow as my backup replacements, do you think it's worthwhile to roll my 2 free transfers? Those are good backups, to be fair, but I would be tempted to sell Matheus Nunes to Chalobah, Tarkowski, Jurian Timber. That'd be my recommendation, and if you have enough money, Foden to Bruno in 24 would be the standout move for you. But yeah, it's definitely worthwhile to roll, but I would suggest selling Matheus Nunes, actually. I don't think he'll start. Matthias Presler says start 1 Voltemada, Anderson or Gravenberch. I don't think Voltemada will be in the lineup. Based off that, I'd probably start Gravenberch. The thing is, in my opinion, one of them will return, but choosing the right one is going to be very difficult for you this week. They're quite unpredictable players, especially Gravenberch. I want to eventually move Raya to Sanchez because the ceiling is much higher and the floor is the same, but making this would leave me without 2 Arsenal defenders and deny a midfield move. Well, you say that, but you also omit one key detail in the fact that Arsenal will keep more clean sheets than Chelsea, so that output will be more reliable. But I get it. Sanchez is cheaper, his ceiling is higher, and in terms of FPL points, it makes more sense to go for Sanchez and then buy an Arsenal defender or Rice in the midfield. So, yeah, you can still get Timber in the defensive line, and Sanchez will be your cheap entry point into that defence. But just bear in mind with Sanchez, after the next 5, Chelsea's fixtures do turn for the worse, and it's more of a short-term punt than anything else. Now, Chelsea could keep clean sheets in some of the more difficult games on paper, but I'd still be quite cautious about a goalkeeper transfer like that one. So I would only do this if it gives you enough money to fund another move, which makes it worthwhile, particularly in the midfield or forward line. I'd definitely start O'Reilly over Dorgu there, James. Dylan, would you play Joachim Andersen or Mukiele? Covered. Yeah, this one as well. All right, let's go to the next few questions. So let's whiz through these, and I'll try to bear in mind the ones I've already covered. Hello, Dylan. Should I bring in Enzo or Ndai? Enzo. Start Chow or Chalobah? Chalobah. And start Rodgers for Dewsbury Hall? Yes, I would do that. I think Haaland will start. With Foden, I'm less convinced. He's actually on my bench in the predicted 11. Is Bruno Guimaraes starting? In every lineup I've seen, it's Lewis Miley, but it all depends on his availability. If Bruno Guimaraes is ready to start, he will. And he's so important to Newcastle United. But yeah, that's an interesting one. I might revisit this. I'll be completely honest with you because I'm almost 50-50 on him starting over Lewis Miley. But yeah, at the moment, I'd lean towards no. But just bear in mind, I could change my mind before the deadline. I have Barnes on the bench, tempted to start him instead. I probably would in this instance, but long-term, Barnes is the sell and Bruno Guimaraes is the keep. I just did Enzo in for Foden, switched myself, then Saka to Bruno and one of Wilson, Rodgers or Bruno Guimaraes to Rice next week with 2 free transfers. Yeah, Bruno Guimaraes by then should be available and I think he's worth keeping. I think in this instance, I'd sell Rodgers and keep Wilson and Rice. I think from a structural perspective, it also makes a lot of sense. Who to play? Gabriel, Van der Ven, Dorgu, Chow, Mukiele. I'd bench Dorgu, and then it's a close one between Chow or Mukiele to bench. So definitely start Gabriel and Van der Ven. With a third one, I'm going to say Mukiele. Haaland and Ekitike starting. Do I start Bowen as well for either Wilson, Gordon, Enzo, or leave him first on my bench? Potentially start Bowen over Gordon. But I am also quite conscious of the fact that Gordon is quite decent and promising in the big fixtures. Cucurella or Cash to start? Another good question here. I would go for Cucurella. If I get Enzo for Tavernier, is it okay to bench Foden? It's always a risk, right? Based on my opinion of Foden being benched, I would say yes, but there's always a risk because even off the bench, you could get a goal or assist and even get 2 or 3. I mean, it would not surprise me there, but yeah, Foden is still a sell, particularly in Game Week 24. If I had Foden personally, it just depends on who the alternative is, but yeah. Essentially what you're saying here is, do I start Foden or buy Enzo for Tavernier and bench Foden? I'd probably buy Enzo, because long-term that also works for you. Thank you, Rai. Appreciate it. I can always turn to you for the best suggestions. Big up to you. Very kind of you, and hopefully the advice pays dividends in the end. Start Mukiele or Chalobah. Both solid, but Chalobah's my preference. I've gone for 1-0 Chelsea and 1-1 between West Ham and Sunderland. Would you do Foden and Rice / Guimaraes out to Bruno and Enzo Neto next week? No, not the second move. Foden to Bruno, yes. That's the main transfer I've recommended in this stream, and it's for next week, not even today. As much as I like Enzo, and Neto's been quite promising this season, I wouldn't sell Rice or Bruno Guimaraes for them. No. Start Foden or Rodgers. I'd probably start Foden in this case, which sounds a bit crazy. Rodgers is more reliable when it comes to minutes, and I think with Foden, we could see him benched. Now, look, Pep Guardiola is Pep Guardiola, right? And he could completely fool us, and maybe Foden starts, and it's somebody else who's benched, like, dare I say, Antoine Semenyo. I don't think that will happen, but we can always be blindsided by these things. I think Foden in this situation. Foden out for Rice and Nunes out for Tarkowski, Captain Wilson. I wouldn't captain Wilson personally, but that's just an opinion of mine. Yep, the moves are looking good, though. I think with Foden out for Rice, even if it backfires this week, long-term it will pay off. And as for Nunes to Tarkowski, it's an upgrade, and Nunes will probably not start. Zero says, can you pick the best 11 and bench order? Okay, so I'd start Raya, Gabriel, Tarkowski, and Mukiele. It's a close one between him and Anderson, to be fair. And I think it's worth revisiting my scoreline predictions for this. I think that would just answer the question. So, just for those who are unaware, and I'll probably go for the graphics as well. West Ham 1, Sunderland 1, Burnley 1, Tottenham 2, Fulham 2, Brighton 1, Man City 3, Wolves 0, Bournemouth 2, Liverpool 2, Brentford 2, Nottingham Forest 1, and a 1-0 victory for Chelsea away to Crystal Palace. Newcastle 2, Aston Villa 1, Arsenal 3, Manchester United 1, and Everton 1, Leeds 0. So based off that, it is close, but I would lean towards Joachim Andersen there. With the midfield, I would bench Garner, even though he probably offers 4 points or above. I just think Foden's ceiling is still higher. Kevin Schade is an option, but against Forest, I'd probably start him. So you've got some benching dilemmas. I can see why you've asked this question, but yeah, I would go for Mukiele, Chow, and Garner on the bench at the moment. And in terms of the order, probably Garner first, Mukiele second, and Chow third, dare I say. Rodgers, Timber, Chalobah, Mukiele, bench 1, says Way, saying benching Rodgers at the moment. Yeah, I think it's going to be Mukiele on the bench for me. Rodgers' ceiling is still significantly higher, but I understand why you're thinking that. Okay, so before I go back to highlighting your questions and going for some different bits and bobs, I'm just going to let this play out with the heat map, the team weakness, and clean sheet odds, top 10 captains, and that will also answer some questions in turn. So Semenyo is my highlight player this week. No Champions League action for him in matchday 7, and the same will go for the upcoming game week next Wednesday. So make sure to stay tuned for the content there. Man City, Arsenal, Brentford, Tottenham, Everton, and Chelsea are in the top 6 for the clean sheet odds. Wolves are last. B stats are taken by the website fantasyfootballpundit.com. And the last section here, anyway, is the top 10 captains, and I've got Haaland in top spot, but there is certainly a case for going for Semenyo or Thiago instead of him. I've also got Cherki ranked quite highly. Saka's in the top 5, with Palmer, Ekitike, Foden, Fernandes, and Bowen inside the top 10. Okay, so I will probably go for the FDR and stuff like that one last time in a couple of minutes, but for now, let's focus on the questions. Drop a like, subscribe. We did hit 38k subscribers yesterday, and the big goal will be 40,000, and we will reach that at some point in 2026. So I do appreciate everyone who has supported the channel, and there are many other ways to do so. There are links in the description for my Patreon and the Championships. So click the join button on YouTube or go to patreon.com/FPL for early access to my videos, prior to comments, which is very useful in streams like this one, and especially the UCL Fantasy ones. And there's also my Discord server for FPL and UCL Fantasy updates. There are many ways of engaging with the content, and a big up to every single one of you, especially the members, patrons, subscribers, and those that have gifted memberships or sent in super chats. A big up to all of you, and let's keep on growing this community even further. There is another super chat here by Craig. Thank you very much. Let's go through that right now, and then the member questions first and foremost. So Raya, Dubravka, O'Reilly, Mukiele, Van Dijk, Richards, Keane, Saka, Foden, Rodgers, Wilson, Bruno Guimaraes, Haaland, Ekitike, Guiu, free transfers and 1 million in the bank. Can I fix it without wildcard in 24? Yes, you can. I know you could look at this and think, oh, Foden I want to sell. Saka is decent, but sometimes getting benched. He's just not worth the money, so he's also sellable. But I look at this and your forward line is still solid. I think keeping Ekitike is a differential play over the next couple of weeks. With your goalkeepers, Roofs and Pickford are stealing the show, but Raya is still in the top 3 for the highest scoring goalkeepers. You don't have Gabriel, which I think would be a cause for concern. I will admit that, but you've got Keane in place already. He's back from suspension in 24. I think with free transfers at your disposal, I would do O'Reilly to Gabriel in 24. That's one move you could make. You've got 1 million in the bank, so you would still need money to make that happen. And that's where downgrading somebody like Foden would really help you. But what I would do in your situation, Craig, is Saka to Fernandes in 24. Even Foden to Rice, either this week or next week. It all depends on whether you think Foden starts or not. And personally, I don't think he will. And then with that extra money, you can do O'Reilly to Gabriel, and then all of a sudden your team looks much better. And then there are still some things to tweak here and there. Maybe you do Raya to Roofs or Pickford, but I don't think that's going to be a high upside move. You could also buy Daniel Munoz if you start liking the look of Palace. I know you've got Richards already in your defensive line, but you could make that sort of swap and chase the upside and differential play. I think the midfield is still in a good position overall, but just with 1 or 2 tweaks there with Fernandes and the likes of Enzo or Declan Rice, you're in a much better position all of a sudden. So, yeah, you don't need to wildcard. I think with just 2 or 3 transfers, your squad will be comparable to the wildcard teams. I think Foden will be benched, and Bruno Guimaraes is a doubt. He is currently not in my predicted lineup, but as I mentioned earlier, there is still a chance he is in the starting 11, and it's between him and Miley. It just really depends on whether he is fit enough to get the nod, because he is so important for Newcastle, and facing Aston Villa will be a very crucial game there. I'm not wildcarding in 24 Baraf as far as I'm aware. The plan is to roll this week and have 2 free transfers. I will talk about my thought process, and I even discussed the temptation to wildcard in my recent videos, because I've been on a downward trajectory recently in FPL, and I made a lot of progress in October and November, but then I think in December I just started to fall back a little bit. So it's time to get back on track. We're approaching February, and the wildcard could certainly be a sort of catalyst for success, but I'm still quite tempted to save that for later in the season, and I'd recommend the same to most people watching. Start Senesio, Elliot Anderson. Elliot Anderson. Buy Gay or Collins? I'd buy Gay. Good to see you, Ignacio. Tengo a 4 jugadores de City. ¿Puedo jugar con los 4? Sí, puedes jugar con los 4, pero la próxima vez que vas a usar una transferencia, tienes que vender un jugador de City. Porque están las reglas, solo puedes tener 3 jugadores, y si tienes esta situación donde tienes 4, te va a forzar a hacer una transferencia, y en tu caso, creo que Foden es el jugador para sacar. Y sí lo haría por Semenyo, pero tienes que vender un jugador de City a otro que no juega para ellos. Así que en tu caso puede ser mejor hacer Foden a Bruno Fernández en la jornada 24, pero también entiendo que está la tentación de comprar a Semenyo ahora. Para mí va a hacer goles y asistencias contra Wolves, y es una buena transferencia ahora. Recuérdame tu chip strategy. Abrazo, mate. Sí, entonces con la estrategia es usar el wildcard, el comodín y todo eso después de la jornada 30. Es posible que tenemos una doble fecha en la jornada 26, y eso puede incluir a Arsenal. Depende mucho de los resultados de la Carabao Cup, pero creo que es mejor usar la mayoría, si no todos, después de la jornada 30. Start Dubravka or Verbruggen? Verbruggen. Start between Bruno Fernandes or Chalobah? Fernandes. Would you play Minter over O'Reilly if you'd reckon Minter's more certain to start this weekend? Good question. I'd still go for O'Reilly personally, but I understand why you've asked it. I definitely do. I don't have Minter in my predicted 11, but most that I've seen do have Minter. And that's definitely worth bearing in mind. But yeah, Fulham away will be tough. I have backed Fulham to score a goal or 2. So yeah, that would be something else to think about. But yeah, I think with Minter, that's one change I might make to my predicted lineup and put him in there. I will admit that. So yeah, I'm going to make a few alterations to those and give you my final versions. So just give me a second. It should only take a minute or 2. And I'll whiz through the rest of the questions. So hopefully by that stage, I'll have answered everything. And yeah, if I have answered something already, just bear in mind I will go to other questions, and I'll still be quite, open to making sure that you know that your question has been answered as well. So Minter's price, I think now is 5.9. I'm just going to double check that. 5.8, okay. So he went down a few times since the last prediction I had him in. So let's go for this. Just going to have a quick look as well at all these predicted lineups one more time. Okay, I think this is all set. Okay, I think we're good to go here. So I'll show that in a few minutes, and also the FDR and stuff like that one more time, just for those who are new to the stream, who are tuning in recently. So we've got just under half an hour until the deadline. Make sure to lock things in. Make sure your captain, the bench is all ordered, even the vice captaincy, which people typically go for their goalkeeper or just don't bother to change. So Dasasa says, "Hi Dylan, what's your opinion?" I think your defensive line needs improvement. So you've got Gabriel, but you've also got 4 defenders who are priced at less than 5 million. And I think Alderete is fine to keep, but Esteve, Anderson, and Cash are all upgradable. And that's where a second Arsenal defender like Timber, Michael Keane, who is back from suspension in 24, also Chalobah and Tarkowski would all come into play. Just bear in mind, I wouldn't go for Tarkowski and Keane simultaneously. The same goes for Pickford in goal. With your attack, Foden is the clear sell. And I would definitely recommend Foden to Fernandes in 24. If you want to go for something a little bit different, then you might want to go in a different direction there. But I still think Fernandes is worth it, to be quite honest with you. And if you need a cash cow, I would sell one of Ekitike or Watkins. And right now, I'd be more keen on keeping Ekitike from those two. And one transfer you could make this week to Sasa is Watkins to Igor Thiago. Bearing in mind as well that Brentford have tough fixtures over the next 4. Morning to Parky, and thank you, Punjabi, for the reminder. I appreciate that. Alexander says, hi Dylan, Foden, Bruno Guimaraes, O'Reilly to Enzo, Semenyo, Timber. So I did highlight this earlier, and my answer was essentially yes, but I don't see Bruno Guimaraes to Enzo as an upgrade. Duarte says, Bruno will probably make 2 points. If Foden doesn't start, he'll make 1 point, but if he does, it can be a haul. Well, that's your opinion, right? It's not being stupid. And if that's the way you see it, would you rather lose out on 1 point, or would you just want to chase the upside, which Foden probably offers a higher ceiling based on the fixture? But Bruno Guimaraes is also a quality player who can return in the big games, and he's produced multiple double-digit hauls recently, and I wish I kept him, but yeah, I had my reasons for selling him at the time. I think in your situation, it makes sense, and I think starting Foden is definitely a viable option, but I'm still going to be the same in terms of recommending selling him in 24. I think O'Reilly will start, but I wouldn't count on it. Should I bench for Rodon or sell? I'd start O'Reilly this week and sell in 24. Easy says, are any of the Senegalese and Moroccan players back to their clubs? So as covered in the predicted lineup section, I expect both Idrissa Gana Gueye and Ndiaye to start for Everton. So the answer would be yes. Triple captain Haaland, it's an option, but I think he's going to score or produce bigger hauls later in the season. And we've also got doubles, potentially 1 in 26, which is where the triple captain could also be used. And Arsenal might be one of the teams doubling, so I'd probably hold off on it personally. When will we start to use all chips in the second half? So this is actually something I talked about in Spanish with Ignacio. I would say after Gameweek 30 is when we should use the majority of our chips, if not all of them. Bench 1, Chalobah, Tarkowski, Virgil. I would bench Van Dijk. Van Heck or Alderete? Close one. I'm going to say Alderete. Should I sell Chow? I don't think he's a priority sell, but I get why people are going cold on him, because Newcastle's short-term fixtures aren't looking great, but they still have some of the best defensive stats, particularly underlying numbers like XGC, expected goals conceded. So I'd lean more towards a no, let's say. Saeed says play free Bruno Guimaraes, Cherki, Mukiele, Chow, Mane. Cherki, Mukiele, and Bruno Guimaraes. Van de Ven or Mukiele? Van de Ven. Start Foden or Cunha? Foden. Ian says, hey Dylan, Happy New Year. Likewise to you, Ian. Have a great 2026. What do you think about Sharda for this game week? Because I want to do Wilson to Sharda. I still think Wilson's the better option long term. He's cheaper. He's scored more points. I think Sharda's very streaky. He can produce a massive haul, like a hat-trick, which he did earlier this season, and I think twice in the previous campaign, and then blank 4 or 5 times in a row, but he makes up for it with those massive hauls. I still think it's worth keeping Wilson, personally. If Haaland's on form, we can triple captain him, but his performances right now, not even sure if we dare to triple captain him now. Well, I get that. It also gives you a bit more confidence and peace of mind when playing a chip like that. It's still not like a groundbreaking booster. Don't get me wrong. We all want to be successful when playing the chips and get a massive return, but both the bench boost and triple captain are the weakest chips. The wildcard and free hit are the most important, but you ultimately want to optimize every single one of them and treat them as an important factor of the game, because they still are. But yeah, with the triple captaincy on Haaland, I would save it for later in the season, but I'm still confident enough in City and Haaland to return now, despite selling him for a hit in UCL Fantasy, but that went quite well. Unfortunately, the other moves didn't. Start Bruno Guimaraes or Van de Ven? Probably Van de Ven. So hopefully you saw that dog beat win. Thank you very much. If FPL has deadlines like UCL, it could be good for us, but feels like cheating. I wouldn't say it feels like cheating, though. I have a different opinion on that. It's just with FPL, they wanted to prevent the early deadlines, with the early leaks that we used to get very often, which I understand, but having it at kickoff would obviously remove that sort of thing, so everyone's on a level playing field when it comes to the first match of a given game week. But everyone has their own opinions on this. I think with international fans, they're all going to agree that having it at kickoff would be better. What do you think about Odegaard for this game week against Burnley? Yeah, used to play for them as well. Mind you, he got 3 shots already. Still not really for me, and I'd love to recommend differential players like this. I'd be more keen on Sharda, to be honest, but because you're selling Wilson for him, that's why I'd say no. But with Odegaard, too inconsistent. He's getting more game time now with the likes of Kudus injured, and you've got Tell and Odegaard as the main wingers right now, but I'm still going to say probably not, because I think with Spurs, they're so inconsistent, and I think Burnley could cause problems there. Start Alderete or O'Reilly. Sanchez needs to adapt to a new high goalkeeper play from Rosenau, or he could get benched sooner. You mentioned this before, but look, in the last FPL game, he produced 11 points. He came on at halftime against Paphos in the Champions League, but Sanchez would still be number 1 in my opinion, but it's maybe a cause for concern in the future. Ramnik says, still have Minter. Should I hope he gets a few minutes or best replacement? It's possible he starts, but I would probably sell him. Yeah. Got Foden, Enzo, Wilson, and Anderson. I think the midfield needs some work there. So Enzo and Wilson are really good options. Anderson is okay for his price, but I would probably invest more money there. So Foden to Fernandes, I think Minter to Rice, and Anderson upgraded to, that would really work for you, but you would probably need another downgrade elsewhere, which might include Ekitike. You've got 1.8 in the bank, which is decent, but you might need more to invest more money in general, especially with the Anderson pick. Baban says, in Wildcard 2014, Fernandes, Mbeumo, Rice, Enzo, Haaland almost locked in. Who else in mids and forwards should I keep on the watch list? Tarkovsky would be one, Gabriel for sure, maybe a second Arsenal defender like Timber, one of Riffs or Pickford in goal. Yeah, a lot of this is covered in my best wildcard squad, and you're probably going to see the updated version very soon, because after I go through a few more, I want to, just remind people of what I talked about earlier. Sydney says, I have 4 free transfers and 2 million in the bank and planning to sell Cunha. Should I take a 1-week punt on Semenyo and I keep long-term, or should I go straight to Enzo or Bruno despite them having worse fixtures? Well, this is the thing, right? I did something similar last week and I bought Rodgers and Rice instead of Fernandes, and Fernandes was the highest scoring one. So it's not always about fixtures. It's about form. It's about the quality of the player and just what they bring to the table. I would just go to Bruno Fernandes and keep it simple. You'll probably blank this week, and that's where you could say, well, if I do it this way, then I can optimize my returns a little bit. But if you buy Enzo this week and then it makes it more difficult to buy Bruno next week, I would just avoid that and buy Bruno now. That'd be my main advice. If you are in a position where you can do what I just said, buy Enzo now and then Fernandes next week, then yeah, that looks pretty reasonable actually. But I think the best thing to do is keep things simple and not overcomplicate it and be too clever. Whenever I've tried to do that, or most of the times that I've tried to do that, it has backfired. Bench 2, Caicedo, Xhaka, Ekitike. I would just start Ekitike, yeah. I'll be honest, Juba, this is one of the things I'm least confident about in 23. That's one of the possible changes I'm going to make to my predicted lineup. But what I'm going to do now, quickly, is have a look and see if there are any updates. But I very much doubt we're going to get that before the deadline. But just hang on a little bit, and I'll see if I can give you updated information, because Eddie Howe didn't give much away in either press conference. But yeah, I think he will play. Yeah, it's still up in the air, to be fair. So just to make it very clear, in my original predicted lineup, I had Lewis Miley in there. the one I showed earlier. But yeah, it all depends. If Bruno Guimaraes is available, I think he would get the nod for sure. So let's see. I'm going to quickly update this graphic and then show you the lineups one last time. Let's see. Is Palmer yellow flagged? Yeah, he is. So, okay. I'll update those two quickly. Bruno Guimaraes and Cole Palmer, and then we're good to go here. And we've got just under 70 minutes until the deadline. I'm going to go through all the graphics and stats and stuff like that one last time and then do some quick fire questions. But I believe in terms of my team, I don't see myself making any transfers or big changes, just the captaincy. That's where things are still up in the air a little bit. Let's go for Bruno Guimaraes. I'm going to go for him to start. Okay, that should be almost done. All right, so just going to have this ready and then, yeah, let's go through the FDR and all this stuff. Okay, so some of your questions are going to be answered with these graphics. With the FDR, if we look at the bottom teams, Sunderland, Spurs, Wolves, Brighton and Brentford are in the top 5. Bournemouth, Fulham, Crystal Palace, Liverpool and Everton are the top 5 teams there until Gameweek 29. But if we look a little bit, actually, because I was comparing the February fixtures and talking about options there, let's look at Gameweek 23 to 27. Yeah, that would change it quite significantly. So Chelsea, Crystal Palace, West Ham, Sunderland, Nottingham Forest are in the top 5 there. With predicted points, Palmer's in 10th, Thiago, Mateta, Mbeumo, Saka, Ekitike, Rice, Gabriel, Fernandes, and Haaland. That is the top 10 until Gameweek 28. With projected price changes, let's see if anything has changed a little bit. Not really. Sharda, Joao Pedro, and Lefay are the potential risers tonight. With price falls, we could see Alien, Hincapié, Foden, Matheus Nunes, Trossard, Kamara, Gavardio, Rogers, Tavernier, Diakite, and that's pretty much it in terms of FPL relevance anyway. So this is one lineup I saw on Twitter by a page called Stat City. It is not set in stone, it's not gospel, but it's just worth bearing in mind. So they've said Donnarumma, Lewis, Kusanov, Gay, Aït-Nouri, O'Reilly, Rodri, Cherki, Doku, Semenyo and Haaland, which is identical to what I predicted. The only change there would be, I think, Aït-Nouri in for Bernardo Silva. Comparing the stats of Fernandes and Mbeumo gives a lot of insight. I think they're both worth purchasing. Someone else earlier talked about having both of them on the wildcard. I would personally favour Fernandes, and a double up in the United midfield could certainly work. Mbeumo shows a lot of goal-scoring potential. From open play, he's going to score more than Fernandes, but I think when it comes to creativity, DEFCON, being on penalties, Fernandes is going to win most of the time. And he had a slow start to the season, missed 2 penalties against Fulham and Brentford, but he is now right up there for midfielders, and he has done very well since returning from injury. Their stats are comparable. Fernandes has more game time, so that obviously leads into his favour, but yeah, they both look like really enticing options, and Fernandes, for me, is the clear standout. With the updated wildcard team, this is what I've gone for, with one downgrade in Bruno Guimaraes to Wilson, just to make this more affordable to people, and myself included. Krupi Jr. in for Barnes, who was just there as a facilitator and enabler. I've got 0.3 in the bank, but as you can see there, double ups for Arsenal and Chelsea. The same goes for Man City as well. And then 2 Sunderland players, but you would be benching Alderete or Mukiele most of the time. 1 Everton, you've got 1 Fulham, 1 Nottingham Forest. Sorry, 1 Nottingham Forest. You've got 1 Brentford. Thiago is facing Nottingham Forest this week. 1 Bournemouth and 1 Burnley. Of course, Bruno Fernandes is the solitary United option. You might be tempted to go for Brian Mbeumo as well. With FPL Challenge, I'll talk more about this after the deadline. I've gone for some very bold picks at the moment, but I am tempted to change a few things. That includes the captaincy, which is currently on Igor Thiago, but this is where Erling Haaland could still be in my FPL Challenge squad, as he typically is, but this is definitely a game format to be different and try some just unique aspects and ideas, you know, in terms of certain player picks and all of this stuff. So this week it is called the ball carrier, so you get +2 points for every successful dribble past an opponent. So next up here, let me just get rid of the message. But I'm going to go through the predicted lineups now, because I did go through the scoreline predictions. Well, I'll probably just show that one more time anyway. But with Arsenal, not really too many concerns or surprises, but both Hincapié and Calafiori are in training. The Italian probably won't feature against United. With Aston Villa, Kamara is going to be out for several months. That's a massive blow there for the villains. And we could see Bogard in central midfield with Onana and Tielemans in a more advanced role. With Bournemouth, Tavernier is going to be out for several weeks, and that's a massive blow. Even Brooks is unavailable, so that is their likely 11. And with Brentford, Dango Ouattara will be knocking on the door. There's Hickey against Henry, and a few other sort of concerns there. Van den Berg is also pushing for a start. The same goes for Jordan Henderson as well. And with Brighton, I think Minter will start. That is a late change I made during this deadline stream, and we could see Gruder on the bench. With Burnley, pretty much what you would expect here. And Ekdal, I believe, is injured, so Esteve would be there with Tuanzebe and Humphreys. And with Chelsea, it's worth bearing in mind that Palmer is yellow flag, but I still think he'll start, and we will probably see Reece James at right back with Malo Gusto on the bench. A return for Crystal Palace that is much needed is Daniel Munoz, and we could see him take the place of Devaney in the starting 11. And with Everton, both Ndiaye and Idrissa Gana Gueye have returned from the African Cup of Nations, where Senegal lifted the trophy. And with Fulham, the main concern is Smith Rowe, but of course several African players are returning in Bassi and Iwobi. That's been the case over the last couple of weeks, and Samuel Chukwueze is another one. With Leeds United, we could see several changes with Bogle and Justin as the wing-backs. Goodmanson is doubtful, and Gruev would likely start in the midfield. With Liverpool, Konate is unavailable due to personal reasons, so Joe Gomez will likely take his place, and Kirkers will start left-back with Robertson on the verge of joining Tottenham Hotspur. And I think Salah could start here for Liverpool, but the alternative would be Szoboszlai on the right and one of McAllister or Jones alongside Gravenberch. With Man City, this is going to be a difficult one to predict, but I think Foden could be on the bench here with Lewis and O'Reilly as the fullbacks. There's also the possibility of O'Reilly playing in the midfield and Aït-Nouri at left-back, so that remains to be seen. With Manchester United, I think they'll go for the same starting 11 that beat Man City last weekend in another tough test at the Emirates. With Newcastle United, I am very conflicted about this. Bruno Guimaraes or Miley, it all depends on the late fitness test, but I'm going to back Guimaraes to start against Aston Villa at home. Moving on to Nottingham Forest, one doubt would be Murillo, but I'm backing him to start alongside Milenkovic in central defence and Ndoye up front over the doubtful Igor Jesus. With Sunderland, I think a 4-2-3-1 is likely, but they do play a sort of hybrid, and this is my predicted 11 for them. And with Tottenham Hotspur, Xavi Simons should be available despite suffering from pain in the Champions League. João Paulinho is doubtful, and I think Gallagher will start alongside Archie Gray. We now have two teams left in West Ham and Wolves. And with the Hammers, I think Tati Castellanos will start up front with Pablo just behind him, Somerville and Bowen on the wings. And last but not least, of course, is going to be the bottom place team, to be fair. But Wolves will likely go for Mane again. He is the most appealing option. And I think with the rest, it is an avoid. But a 3-4-1-2 formation is what they've been going for recently. It has changed up a little bit, but that is what I've gone for with Wolves. And hopefully I hit the 200 mark for them. And the scores you see, the numbers on the top right, is essentially my correct scoreline predictions for the season so far. I'll let this play out as well, the scoreline predictions. Not read them out though, because I've done that a few times by this point, but it give you insight into which teams I back to keep a clean sheet, which teams will score a lot of goals, and also the team weakness and highlighted players, which you're going to see in this section, but quite another typical one here with Man City, who are in second place in the Premier League table. Third place, same crap you could say. They are facing bottom of the league, Wolves, and Antoine Semenyo is my highlighted player. He is also second in my Captaincy list. Man City top the clean sheet odds charts with Arsenal, Brentford, Tottenham, Everton, Chelsea in the top 6, and Wolves are inevitably last, facing Man City away. And there are some interesting picks in the top 10 Captaincy section, and Bruno Fernandes is in 9th. Bowen just about makes it there, but there aren't too many standouts this week, and we could definitely go for something a bit different. Foden is arguably too high because I don't think he'll even start, but if he were to, then he would easily be in the top 10 list. I think his ceiling would be very high as a result. Ekitike, Palmer, Saka, Cherki, Thiago, Semenyo are the main contenders for Erling Haaland. So now, let's conclude the stream by locking in our squads and answering your final questions. With my team, I've got Sanchez, Anderson, O'Reilly, Gabriel, Wilson, Rodgers, Rice, Saka, Ekitike, Haaland captain, and Igor Thiago as the vice. On my bench, Dubravka, Dalot, Klein, and Potts to complete the 15-man squad. Lazy FPL saying Haaland benched. Thank you for that. That is definitely worth having a look at. And I did say this before, it would not surprise me if this happened, but there you go. That's why it's worth having a look here. So I'm just going to verify this myself. I do trust you, but yeah, Foden and Haaland on the bench. Let's go to this now, and I'm going to make some changes here. I mean, would I bench Haaland? This is definitely reliable, by the way. Just putting it out there. So let's go through this. Thank you to those who have pointed me in the right direction. So, would you bench Haaland? That's going to be the next poll. Yeah. Yeah, I saw it, don't worry. Yeah. That is very reliable. Thank you as well to Punjabi for putting the link. I appreciate that. But I can definitely vouch for Lazy FPL. They've gone virtually most things right with Man City. Start 2 of Krupi Jr., Mane, Mukiele, Chalobah, and Chow. I would start Chalobah, and I take a punt on Krupi Jr. personally. Apparently, C's expected goals have dropped a bit today. Now 2.78, 2.53 now, 2.36 in the last 2 hours, suggesting they know something. Well, yeah, maybe they do. That is a good point, but maybe it's just, I think it typically is more volatile in the build-up to the game. Yeah, I think Gay will start, but who knows at this point? With Foden, I'm not surprised about him being benched, but Haaland is a crazy one. Will Foden start? No, I don't think so. And this is a reliable source saying that both Haaland and Foden aren't going to start. So what I'm going to do here is go to FPL and start making changes. So Igor Thiago is going to be my captain. I'm going to put Saka as my vice. And do I make a change? I do have 1.8 million in the bank, so I could do Dalot to Timber. The problem with that, well, to be fair, I could still do Saka to Fernandes next week, so that's not really a big deal. But yeah, that is an option for me, just in case Haaland doesn't play a single minute. So let's see the poll. I'm interested to see what you lot are saying. So people are not benching Haaland because he can still come off the bench and do well. We have no information on Semenyo, but I think he will start, and I've been very consistent on that. Well, apparently, according to Lazy FPL, Haaland is benched, so it's worth bearing that in mind. Yeah, that's a big bombshell. So yeah, if he ends up starting somehow, yeah, that would be horrendous. But yeah, I'm look, one of the main reasons why I sold Haaland in UCL Fantasy for a hit, by the way, was because I thought he would be benched against one of Bodo Glimt or Wolves, and I had the feeling it would be in the Champions League. So yeah, the fact he started that game, played the full 90, it makes sense for him to be benched here against Wolves, and City could still get the job done. But yeah, it's a very crazy moment. Heavy, once again, doing well without Haaland, so fair play. Wilson over Enzo. In terms of who to buy, I'd rather get Enzo, but would I sell Wilson to Enzo now, necessarily? I'm not so sure. There's not really much in it. But yeah, big up to everyone who reminded me and pointed me in the right direction, because I wouldn't have seen it. I've been focusing on the questions. But yeah, just to make it clear, it looks like Haaland and Foden are benched. Ekitike or Semenyo captain? Semenyo. I think Thiago for me. For those with Semenyo, I'd go in that direction. But yeah, I am still tempted. Now, I think what I'm probably going to do is roll and next week buy the likes of Fernandes and Durin Timber. But yeah, there's definitely a lot to think about here. We did get that bombshell Erling Haaland on the bench, it looks like. Yeah, Marmoush up top then. I'll make a cheeky lineup prediction there. Lineup change prediction. So let's put Marmoush in there for Erling Haaland. And I'll show you my final predictions after the deadline has passed, because there's still things to go through. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, we've only got less than 2 minutes left, is put a poll out for your favourite captain. But 61% of you have said, no, you're not going to bench Haaland. So a lot of information has been discussed in the stream, from predicted lineups, team news, injury updates, top 10 captains, all of that stuff. But yeah, that is going to be the bombshell. We have less than a minute to the deadline. Make sure to lock things in. Ahmad says, draw Pedro my captain for this week. All the best. That is certainly interesting. And he'll probably outscore Haaland, depending on how many minutes he gets. I'm not sure, Sophia. I'm still going to start him, I think. I mean, my options on the bench are terrible. There's no way I'd start Dallo away to Arsenal over Haaland. Hopefully I haven't jinxed myself and my team by saying that, but there you go. Who is your captain with the rumours of Haaland being benched? Gone with Ekitike, captain, sack of ice. I like the look of that. Looks really good. Let's put Thiago, Semenyo, dare I say Saka as an option? Okay. So that's the poll, but we are locked in now. And luckily I did... I didn't change my family members' team. Yeah, there's a lot to keep track of. Yeah. I don't think I can change that now. But yeah, we are locked in. Absolutely locked in. Yeah. So yeah, that's all done. New Gandor says Ekitike. To be honest, starting Haaland seems to be okay. Yeah, but then it comes to the question of, do we bench him? Do we captain Thiago, Semenyo, Saka, Ekitike, who is... proven to be quite popular here. Just sold Foden for Bruno after that confirmation. Yeah, makes sense. I sold Foden last week. I wish I bought Bruno in. You might get a blank from Bruno, and hopefully he does, but yeah, for 24, it looks really good. Play Klein or Goodmanson? Well, both of them probably won't start. I think Goodmanson's more likely, so he'd be the pick. Have Saka, Rice, Timber, sell Saka for Bruno, and sell Keane for Gabriel -4 roll. No, don't make that -4 here. As I talked about before, I prefer Saka for Bruno now in 23, but for the long term, it would be Fernandes all day long. So hold now, do it in 24 for free, and that's the best way to go about it. Yeah, it doesn't matter, Twisted Park. I mean, I did highlight all of them anyway, and appreciate all the breaking news, because I wouldn't have seen it. Start Chalobah, Bruno Guimaraes. Probably Chalobah. Intervene. Haaland and Foden not starting, confirmed. Yeah, that's an interesting way of putting it. Yeah, definitely Rice for me over Neto. Rice is still one of the best midfielders to buy. I stand by that. Vissa, Ghana, or Ndai? I think Ndai. He's not an absolute guaranteed starter, though. Best keep on till Wildcard. Depends when you're looking to Wildcard, but I would say Pickford or Roofs. Just depends on your budget as well, but those are the top two. Mukiele or O'Reilly? O'Reilly. My FPL challenge this week, Pickford, Hall, Doku, captain, Estevao if starting, otherwise Saka, Thiago, Ekitike. Yeah, looks good. And yeah, FPL challenge, that's what I'm going to go to next, because this is all done and dusted. Thiago's my final captain. The team has been saved, thankfully. Saka's my vice. Yeah, let's go to FPL Challenge now. And no Erling Haaland here as well. But Doku's in there. The same goes for Mitoma and Saka. What I might do instead of Doku is go for Semenyo, even though Doku is a better dribbler. But yeah, I think that would be one possible change. Error saving your team. Okay, that's great. I think they've changed the deadlines then, haven't they? Let's see. Or maybe because that caused a little glitch. Yes, save now. Okay, so that's one move. I am also looking at selling roofs. So that could be for Pickford, and then I could pick Chalobah. Yeah, I'm probably going to do that, actually. So Pickford, and let's go for Chalobah. Facing his former club, even though he was on loan there. There you go. More changes, and Mitoma's another one I could sell. Ideally for another dribbler, but with a more prolific record in terms of scoring and assisting. Yeah, looking at the list here, not particularly enthused by these options. I mean, another forward I could go for is Ekitike. He's a decent dribbler. Yeah, let's go for that then, why not? Ekitike. So that is my current FPL Challenge squad, but I am open to buying back a dribbler like Mitoma. But yeah, I've made a few changes there to my squad. Play Klein or Goodmanson. Yeah, that's been covered as well. Hi, Dylan. Foden to Cherky this week and Semenyo to Bruno Fernandes next week. I wouldn't buy Cherky. For those that have him, hold. But yeah, my advice would have been to buy Enzo instead. Semenyo to Fernandes next week. Yeah, I think Fernandes is an upgrade, but I wouldn't sell Semenyo. I'd still keep him. If anything, what I would say is keep Semenyo and sell Cherky, but I'm guessing it's a fund issue. Thank you to Mina for becoming a differential. And yeah, we've got a lot of members, over 150, I believe, members and patrons. So thank you very much. And the likes of Paredes and Ahmad and Ahmed have gifted a lot of them. So a big up to all of you. Thank you, Jibba the guy. And hopefully this has helped you and you get a lot of FPL points and a green arrow. Good luck, Sudindra. Captain Tarkovsky for me. Better than Haaland, it looks like. At least for this week. Captain Palmer, let's go, says Sydney. All the best with that one. He is in my top 6 for the captaincy list. But probably 5th now because Haaland's benched. Captain Cherky last second. That has a high ceiling. And even if he is benched somehow, he is capable of returning in limited minutes. Haaland is a robot. Pep not benching the robot. Screw it. Foden to Semenyo. I'm wildcarding next week probably anyway. Yeah, some people are talking about the Gameweek 24 wildcard. I'm not completely discarding it, but yeah, it's I'd ideally save it for later in the season. Start DCL over Haaland. Probably not for me still, because off the bench Haaland could score. I'm just hoping for a 10-minute cameo goal. Yeah, that's not too shabby. I think that is probably, yeah. The thing is, a lot of people, especially casuals, would have captained Haaland. So it might not actually be in our best interests, even though we own him. Semenyo starting? Yeah, I think so. Ekitike or Saka captain now? That's a valid point. 2 leading Captaincy contenders, both in my list. I think Saka's the one. Who do we captain now? Well, the poll hopefully helped you. I captained Thiago in the end. And the last time I captained him, he blanked, but let's not talk about that. Could be the biggest troll from FPL Lazy or biggest troll from Pep. I don't think FPL Lazy or Lazy FPL would be trolling though. Maybe something late would have happened in the lineup, and I think that happened once before with Grealish at Man City. So it is what it is, right? But it would be very frustrating. Hopefully the information is correct, and I believe it is. And yeah, either way, it's not worth abusing people over. Start Bruno Guimaraes or Chalobah? Chalobah. Our captain gay. That's interesting. Sí, Néstor. Como dije en inglés y mostré el gráfico, parece que Haaland y Foden estarán en el banco. Así que sí, vuelve la Pep Roulette, pero creo que tiene sentido y hace bastante tiempo que Haaland necesita un descanso. Yo tenía el pensamiento que iba a pasar contra Bodo Glimt y jugó los 90 minutos, así que no me sorprende ahora que está en el banco contra Wolves. Yeah, best captain now then. For me, it'd be Semenyo and Thiago. Kaio999 says, hi Dylan, hope you're doing well. Can you bench one, please? I think from those 4 players, it's probably going to be Miley. Screw it, just keep the captaincy on Haaland. He can score goals more from the bench than Thiago in 90 minutes. Not sure if I agree on that. It just really depends on the context. Does Haaland get 30, 40 minutes? If Wolves take a lead, then Haaland at halftime could be subbed on, and then he's got plenty of time to make an impact. I started Wilson and Bruno. Looks good. I think it makes sense to start both of them, even with Fernandes facing Arsenal away. If I had Semenyo or Thiago, would have been one of them. Yes, and that is the order I've actually ranked them in as well. Hey Charmy says, crazy stuff. Sold Foden to Enzo and captain him. Therefore, bench Bruno Guimaraes and still starting Haaland. It's insane, right? FPL can be like that sometimes. And yeah, I kind of briefly mentioned the leaks we used to get and the deadlines, and then we get a leak for the first time with major breaking news. And yeah, if the website crashed a few minutes before the deadline, it wouldn't have surprised me either. We've seen that happen so many times in the past as well. I made a blunder, Dylan. I captained Haaland. Am I such an idiot? I am such an idiot. No, you're not an idiot, because he can still come off the bench and score or get some returns. But yeah, we can't say it's a blunder yet because we haven't even seen the game start. And there is still the chance, albeit small, that Haaland starts now against Wolves. So we'll see. Sefer says Haaland on my bench. Ekitike captain, Rice Vice. That's a nice ring to it. Rice Vice. Vice Rice. Pep playing mind games. Not sure if it's mind games. I think it's just the rest. Fernandes captain. Is that Bruno Fernandes? I'm guessing it's Enzo based on the spelling, but yeah, I think with both of them, they're good options this week, but more enticing in the weeks to come. Cherky captain says Punjabi. That's another one. Same sold Foden captain Ekitike. Quite a few Ekitike lovers in the chat. Hopefully he does return. Ended up captaining Ekitike and benched Foden. So yeah, this seems to be a very popular move. Maybe I should have included Ekitike in the poll. Would have loved Palmer, but couldn't afford him, and not convinced he is fit. Yeah, there's no guarantee he starts, and we could see Delap and Joao Pedro play simultaneously. There's also Neto, Esteval, and Garnacho, who can play on the wings. Starting Minter 2 as a differential. Yeah, I think he will start. And by the way, before the lineup is out, let's do a cheeky little predicted lineup update. I'm going to do that. So, Haaland, bye-bye. And I'm going to put Marmoush in there. That's annoying. That's very annoying. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. Let me just double check Marmoush's price. So Marmoush is 8.3. Okay. Just going to show you my predicted lineups one more time and mainly focus on the City one. So based on the information we have, this will be my final prediction for them. Let's see. Okay, just updating some graphics and also sorting this out. Okay, I think that would be it. Yeah, that should be good. Okay. And let's now go to the predicted lineups one last time. And we're going to get the official City and Wolves 11s as well. And you can see my predictions for all the other Premier League teams. But I'll focus on Man City and Wolves because that is the early... Actually, what am I saying? We're not going to get the lineup until later, right? Yeah, that's not the early kickoff. We'll focus on West Ham and Sunderland. But yeah, I wanted to show you the Man City update. So, a few yellow flag players in these predicted 11s like Palmer, Munoz, even Smith Rowe that you're going to see coming up next. But yeah, we'll pause it on the citizens. And Marmoush will start in his place. And I'm going to stick with the same other players really for Manchester City. So Donnarumma, Lewis, Kusanov, Gay, O'Reilly, Rodri, Semenyo, Cherki, Bernardo, Doku, and Marmoush. So let's pause it on West Ham Sunderland, actually, when they come about. So with the Black Cats, yeah, we're going to find out in less than 2 minutes. But I've gone for Rufs, Mukiele, Ballard, Alderete, Reynildo, Xhaka, Siddiqui, Hume, Lefay, Mundle, and Brobby. And for the Hammers, who are up next, Areola, Wan-Bissaka, Mavropanos, Todibo, Scarles, Soucek, Fernandez, Bowen, Pablo, Somerville, and Tati Castellanos. Here is my Wolves predicted 11 as well. So let's get these up and running. So it's all ready. Let's put West Ham and Sunderland. Okay. So that is the early kickoff at 12:30 in the UK. West Ham against Sunderland. And in just a few seconds, we're going to find out how they line up. And we can offer our thoughts there. Maybe not too much fantasy relevance this week, but yeah, Sunderland have been very impressive this season. So drop a like even if you're on your way out. I do appreciate those who have supported the channel. We hit 38,000 subscribers yesterday, so big up to the community. 00 says, I really like my 11 for this week. Raya, Gabriel, Tarkovsky, Joachim Andersen, Rice, Enzo, Foden, Sharda, Haaland, Ekitike, Thiago. Potential 70 points, but only problem is my captain is Haaland. You never know. It could be a blessing in disguise. So it's worth just waiting and seeing what happens, really. We can talk about this in future videos and hopefully a reaction stream tonight. But yeah, I'll try my best to do that. There's a lot to get through in terms of UCL fantasy and FPL content, but I'm doing my very best balancing that out. And yeah, still keeping up the consistency of the past 5-6 years. But yeah, I think your team is in good shape, and I don't really blame you for feeling confident despite the so-called captaincy blunder. I made the Foden to Enzo transfer at the start of the stream, so I don't feel bad about it now. Well, definitely not with the rumours of him being benched, but players can still score or assist off the bench. I'm not trying to manifest it, just, yeah, putting it out there. Oh no, I was distracted and left Haaland captain. It happens, right? In FPL, there are so many different things you've got to look out for. The same goes for any fantasy football game. Larkin says, I have Foden, Grealish, Voltemada, Nunes with 2 free transfers. Who are priority sells and to who? I think Foden and Voltemada are the priority sells, but I'll be completely honest with you, they all are sells in my opinion. And I would even be open to taking a hit to selling 3 of those players. But it all depends on the other options you have in your 15-man squad, because you might be in a position where you don't need to do that. But I think a -4 hit could be in your best interest. Okay, so let's go to West Ham and the not predicted lineup, the actual bloody lineup. And then we'll move on to Sunderland. Okay, let's start off with the Hammers. Areola, Wan-Bissaka, Todibo, Mavropanos, Scarles, Soucek, Fernandez, Bowen, Somerville, Pablo, and Tati Castellanos. So 11 out of 11 correct for West Ham. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. As for Sunderland, Rufs, Mukiele, Ballard, Alderete, Reynildo, Hume, Siddiqui, Lefay, Mundle, Mayenda, and Brobby. I'm just saying, you saw it, right? Yeah, that's 11 out of 11, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I think that's correct. Does look like a back 5 though, but who cares? It's the players that count. And yeah, it's 11 out of 11 there for both Sunderland and West Ham. A good start to Gameweek 23, even though there are no points on the board for this. But yeah, I am keeping track of my scores. And that's a nice little boost there for the Black Cats and the Hammers when it comes to my predicted lineups. So there you go. No real surprises there. And then we're good to go, essentially. I'll go back to FPL Challenge. We can talk about this a little bit more before concluding this stream, but I've currently got Thiago captain here. I am tempted to captain somebody else, maybe Antoine Semenyo, actually. I think Semenyo captain in FPL Challenge would be my other pick, my other change here. So this could be my final FPL Challenge squad. Pickford, Chalobah, Semenyo captain, Saka, Thiago, and Ekitike. So, yeah, thank you to those that have liked. Let's get this to even more. And yeah, click the share button on YouTube. For those that love FPL and UCL Fantasy, the hype button, subscribe. There's also the notification bell. And 39,000 subscribers is the next objective, one step at a time. And then 40k is the next big goal of 2026, which we should achieve within the next couple of months. So thank you very much for all the support. Néstor dice, tengo a Haaland y Foden en mi equipo. ¿Hay alguna web que diga que serán banca? Sí, Lazy FPL es muy confiable con noticias de City. Hace bastante que tenemos un leak como esto, pero digo la verdad, parece que Foden y Haaland no va a jugar o por lo menos empezar el partido contra Wolves. Captain Thiago Surendra decided to sell Foden and Keane to Rice and Chalobah, benched Haaland for Semenyo and Anderson. Hope it goes well. Makes sense. Benching Haaland is always a bit iffy. I've started him, and we'll see how that goes. But yeah, it's a very awkward situation to be in, and no one expected this. Who is the best Man City midfielder this week? Semenyo. I think Cherky would be second. The app crashed, so I had to make changes on the web. Not surprised, and I think a lot of people would have been engaged and sort of in the loop about the Haaland bench news. Watch Haaland outscore every player who plays 90 minutes? We'll see. I don't think that'll be the case, though. There might just be someone completely random who gets a 15-plus pointer, but yeah, only time will tell. I captain Gay, says Kim. I wouldn't have captained him personally, but a clean sheet, DEFCON, and bonus points is definitely possible. And if he were to add a goal or assist, then yeah, you're in cuckoo land, as they say. Captain Wirtz. Yeah, both him and Ekitike are getting quite a lot of love recently, especially Florian Wirtz. And with the captaincy this week, I think Ekitike might now have more or higher effective ownership than he would have before the Haaland news. I'm at rank 3004, panic captain Tarkovsky. Yeah, good rank. I know you've been around the top 1k recently. Very good position to be in. And Captain Tarkovsky is interesting. I have gone for 1-0 Everton, which would mean a decent return. I would be extremely annoyed if Pep would bench Haaland. Literally 65% went with him. Well, it's very reliable, the source. I can vouch for them. We'll wait and see if it ends up changing, because sometimes you get this in football where a player's expected to start and then they don't. Maybe Haaland then gets into the lineup, but it's very likely now that he's going to be on the bench. 1 free transfer made, Foden to Enzo. 2 free transfers next week, says Harrison James. Saka to Bruno, and one of Wilson, Rodgers, or Bruno Guimaraes to Rice next week. Cheers for your insights as always, Dylan, and good luck. Thank you very much, Harrison. All the best of luck to you as well for Gameweek 23 and beyond. I like the move this week, and with Foden potentially being benched, I think it makes a lot of sense there. And your moves next week would be very enticing. In terms of who to sell for Rice, it might be Rodgers, depending on Bruno Guimaraes' availability. But if you're in a position where you could afford selling Wilson to Rice, then that looks really solid as well. I think Rodgers and Bruno will score more than Wilson, but there's also a value perspective to take into account there as well. Gabriel's my vice. Decent. I think this week against United, I don't back Arsenal to keep a clean sheet, but they have a very solid defence. I forgot to captain someone else. Yeah, it happens. The first thing I thought of when I saw the news is, let me change my captain, because that's all that I really needed to sort of modify and tweak. Thiago captainers, let's go, Dylan. Hope it goes well for us. Yes, and I think he has, in FPL terms, he owes me something, because I captained him shortly after buying him, and he let me down big time. And I think Haaland scored a brace that week. Hi, Dylan. I captained Gabriel. Let's see how it goes. I hope for your sake and for the success of Arsenal that it goes well, but you can never really tell with this. This is the game where we need luck. Screw strategy. I think strategy is still important, and it gives you a better chance of being lucky. Luck is ultimately going to be the bulk of the game. There's always that debate about skill versus luck, but there is still an element of skill and of strategy being very important, so I slightly disagree there. Tusta Parky says, I have gone Rufs, Gabriel, Timber, Chalobah, Van de Ven, Bruno Fernandes, Semenyo, Rice, Thiago captain, DCL, Haaland, Vice with Dubravka, Garner, Foden, Chow on the bench. Interesting. I mean, yeah, who would have thought Foden second on the bench against Wolves at home? But yeah, the information is solid, it looks like. Good starting 11. In terms of the future, a few things to really think about. I don't think there's too much that stands out in terms of priorities. I think we're in a good place. Definitely no need to wildcard for you. Próxima semana ya vendo a Foden y voy por un Bruno Fernández. Sí, creo que sí. En Buma sería bueno también. Declan Rice es una muy buena opción en el medio campo, pero Bruno Fernández es el mejor mediocampista para comprar en la jornada 24 para mí. Captain and Gabriel, all the best with that one, Fernando. How did City leak this early? Yeah, true. That's why for a second I was thinking about seeing their lineups now and that they were the early kickoff for a second, but then I quickly remembered that they play later. I'm not sure how it came about that early, but yeah, I'm sure they'll be aware of it. Anyone panicked and pressed the wrong captaincy or button? I think a lot of people did. Or maybe they didn't change the captain from Haaland as they wanted to. I just captained Cherki. It's not a bad choice for me. There is still an element of rotation risk. We could see Reinders start instead of him with Bernardo, and maybe O'Reilly plays in the midfield, and Aït-Nouri and Lewis are going to be the fullbacks. So you can never fully tell with Pep, but with the information we have, it looks like Haaland will be benched for Marmoush. With Foden, it's a bit unclear who replaces him directly, but I think Doku and Semenyo will be on the wings, and then two of Cherki, Reinders, and Bernardo Silva will start in the midfield, in my opinion. Captain Gabriel, Arsenal clean sheet and a goal. Hopefully, but I've gone for 3-1 Arsenal in my prediction. Captain my fellow Brazilian Thiago, let's get it, says Brazilian skill. Yeah, hopefully he does the business. I've also captained him. Yeah, I've got a bone to pick with him because the one time I captained him earlier this season, he blanked, but yeah, I think you'll make up for it. How can you panic and captain Tarkowski? My lord, this game, you're probably doomed. Who knows? If Tarkowski scores one of his rare goals and gets DEFCON clean sheet, then he might be laughing at the end. Football is a funny game, that's for sure. Baraf says, I'm done this game week. It hasn't even started, mate. Give it some hope. Give it some time. Catch any of the AFCON final, Dylan? Yes, towards the very end, I did miss the absolute crazy scenes of the disallowed goal and the penalty, but yeah, I watched some highlights, and yeah, it was a great game despite the low-scoring affair, which most finals typically are, especially on the international stage. Twisted Parky says West Ham 0, Sunderland 1, Burnley 0, Tottenham 1. What about Sunderland, by the way? I'm not sure what you've gone for there. Fulham 1, Brighton 1, City 3, Wolves 1, maybe 2-1. Bournemouth 1, Liverpool 2, Brentford 2-1 against Forest, Palace 0, Chelsea 1. I have the same scoreline for that. And also Newcastle versus Villa. Arsenal 2, Man United 1, Everton 1, Leeds 1. I was thinking about 2-1 for the Arsenal game, but yeah, I'm sticking with a 3-1 for now. The thing I've noticed, by the way, whenever I predict an Arsenal draw, they win, like against Inter Milan. When I predict they win, they draw. So, yeah, maybe I need to just pick up my predictions and just take one for the team and ensure Arsenal win. I think West Ham 1-1 is biased because I have riffs and Arsenal might change. Yeah, but I've gone for 1-1 myself and I've got no Sunderland or West Ham assets anyway. So I think it's a logical prediction. Hopefully Haaland comes on very late and does absolutely nothing. Yeah, I also hope for the same thing because his EO is still going to be high and it's a way of gaining a lot of traction or gaining a lot of momentum in my mini leagues and the rankings. So I'm hoping for the same thing as you. Semenyo more likely to get some dribbles too, so I back that. Exactly. And I think it makes a lot of sense. I don't have him in FPL, so I might as well have him in one way, shape or form. I decided to roll a transfer. I captain Haaland. You never know. He can still come off the bench and do something, but yeah, I also rolled this week. Up to 721 overall in FPL Challenge. Very good rank. If only it was going that well with regular FPL. UCL going great too, thanks to your insights and some luck. I appreciate that, and I'm glad to hear it. I'll be honest, UCL Fantasy, I haven't checked my recent rank, but yeah, it was disappointing. I think the last couple of match days have been very shaky. And despite Mbappe for Haaland being a success, the other transfers from -4 were disastrous. Rafinha blanked and Upamecano didn't even play at all, so I was down to 10 men. Yeah, still some positives for UCL Fantasy. I'll talk about that in my upcoming content, but yeah, I wish I had the Limitless, and I would have definitely used their match day 7. When I captained Thiago, I forgot about Semenyo. Yeah, Forest are not bad defensively, but they still have their moments, and I think Brentford are very promising offensively, and Thiago is just so consistent. So if I had Semenyo, I would have captained him. I'm not going to deny that, but yeah, with what I had, I think Thiago was the standout captaincy choice. Ended up on Palmer captain, but started Haaland because I have Krupi and Mane as my other two forwards. Yeah, there is a chance Palmer doesn't start, but he is in my predicted 11, and he's also my top 6 for the captaincy list. Damn, Trent to leave Real Madrid in the summer. I saw that rumour, but I don't think it's true, and I saw other sources and reports recently that Arbeloa said that he's got a big role for Trent and they trust him. So I'm not really sure how much to buy into that. It would be very strange. They just bought Trent Alexander-Arnold. Arbeloa is trying to get the whole team on side, and he's being quite diplomatic and maybe giving in a little bit to player power. But yeah, I'd be surprised by that. I don't think that's true. Imagination match. First half, City 0, Wolves 0. Haaland subbed in second half and scores a hat-trick. I think that's heavily influenced by you captaining him still. I transferred Mbeumo in for Foden, but forgot to put him in the starting lineup. Well, that could be a huge issue, depending on who's in your starting 11 over Mbeumo. But yeah, I think Arsenal could keep him quiet, and I hope they do. But Mbeumo and Fernandes will be massive threats tomorrow. Yeah, hopefully I can do a reaction stream today. It has been a while since I've done one. And I also have plenty of FPL and UCL fantasy content planned for the next week and for the rest of the season. But yeah, because it's a Champions League match day, it's going to be a bit hectic. But hopefully I can do a reaction stream tonight. But yeah, life can get in the way as well sometimes, right? Yeah, Haaland, it looks like it's going to be on the bench. I do trust Lazy FPL, who broke the news. Yeah, hopefully I can do a reaction stream, and maybe by then we can talk about Haaland either producing a massive haul and regret for those that switched to captaincy, or yeah, those Haaland captainers venting a little bit. So one of those things will happen. Watch for Haaland outscoring every player. Yeah, you said that before, Easy. Yeah, you're trying to reassure yourself at this point, I think. That would read West Ham 0, Sunderland 1, Burnley 0, Spurs 1. Nah, I meant I went 1-0 for Sunderland. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, maybe it is influenced, but it's also a logical prediction. It's very similar to my 1-1, but of course different permutations and consequences for the teams involved. But yeah. Hi Dylan, appreciate the Haaland news. Well, the people to thank were in the live chat because I was reading the comments and I wasn't looking at Twitter at the time. And yeah, people didn't tell me. I would have still captained Haaland, which maybe in the end will be a blessing in disguise or a curse. Only time will tell. Went for a wildcard team of Raya, Gabriel, Chalobah, Patterson, Gay, Bruno Fernandes, Wilson, Semenyo, Rogers, Enzo and Thiago captain. Yeah, hopefully for both of our sakes, Thiago delivers on the captaincy front. I think Patterson isn't a good pick, but the rest looks really good. But I think Patterson is quite short-term because Keane will be back from suspension in 24. And when that happens, Jake O'Brien will likely play right back and Keane will slot in central defence alongside Tarkowski. But yeah, the rest is well thought out and I think it's in a great position. I wish I had that team, to be honest with you. Is Bowen an option this game? He can challenge? Yes, but I don't see myself going for Bowen over Thiago or Ekitike. And there are even other midfielders I'd be tempted by. A lot of FPL managers changing captaincy last minute could be good or could backfire. Well, yes, that's exactly what could be discussed in a potential reaction stream. I think that'd be quite interesting and a great way to reintroduce the reaction streams to the channel again. This Gameweek is fun. Yes, and it hasn't even started. So the discussion is there. And yeah, that's what FPL is all about. These funny stories, these kind of surprising bits of news, and just seeing the massive swings between someone who captained a certain player or benched him or maybe ended up not captaining him. Only time will tell. If Frank loses, will he be sacked and for who? Yeah, I think it's a possibility. They're doing well in the Champions League, which gives them a bit of grace, but they're out of all the cup competitions realistically. Well, let's not say anything. You never know in football. They could go quite far in the Champions League, to be fair. But yeah, in the Premier League, no chance of winning that this season. And they're in a very poor position in the league table. So yeah, it's possible. Best replacements, or who would they go for? Someone said Amorim in the last stream. Who knows at this point? But that's an interesting one to think about. Don't know if you followed any of the Europa League too, but Robbie Keane's Hungary team in the top 8 and Victoria Pilsen undefeated playing peak around football. Been an entertaining competition this year. I haven't been following the Europa League this season, to be quite honest with you. Just the Champions League, Premier League, and the competitions I mainly cover on this channel. But yeah, I'll try to keep an eye on it because it's still relevant and there could be some interesting games in the knockout stages in particular. So yeah, I'll have a look at that. How FPL Lazy gets this lineup leak, from who they get the leaks from, no one knows that, mate, and they're not going to tell you, that's for sure, but they've been consistently right in the past, so I can vouch for them. Benched Haaland for the most reliable van on the market. Heck, well, there's a lot of them. Van Dijk, Van Heck, Van den Berg, but not all of them are reliable. Maybe you're a Brighton fan, Andrew Barton. Maybe you are. And if you are, then talk to Twisted Parky. You can make a good friend there. Hoping something from Bowen this week and then transferring out. Makes sense. I think Bowen is a sell long term and he has been quite underwhelming recently. So it makes a lot of sense to do that. For some reason, I see Roberto Martinez or Pochettino going back to Spurs after the wildcard. Pochettino, yes. He is still the manager of the USA. And Roberto Martinez obviously at Portugal. But I think from those two, Poch is more likely. City 0, Wolves 0. Mate, you're just saying the same thing at this point, Easy. Like, yeah, you're really trying to reassure yourself at this point. Take it easy. It's not a big deal anyway, but yeah, I think Haaland will score for what it's worth. Maybe not a brace or hat-trick, but I think he will score. I think if Haaland is benched, he will be benched for the whole entire game. Man City has a big game on Wednesday, therefore I think he should be rested. Well, that depends on game state, Mina. So if City are drawing, as Easy says, or trailing, then they'll bring on Haaland. But yeah, there are plenty of examples where you see Man City sort of like not making too many substitutions, and we even saw that against Bodo Glimt, where Haaland played the full 90, even though they could have made the sub earlier and brought him off and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that is definitely a possibility, and that would be far from ideal for me with Dalot on the bench. If only that was the case last week, right? I still don't think United keep a clean sheet against Arsenal, and hopefully that's the case. But yeah, my bench is looking quite poor. I need to really strengthen that and bolster my 15-man squad. But yeah, I think Erling Haaland will come on at some point. That's just my opinion, but what you say is definitely valid. Yeah, who doesn't love seagulls there, Twisted Parky? Everyone loves them. Van der Ven can dribble out the entire pitch. FPL challenge. Not a bad shout, but I think Burnley will score, so I'm quite happy to have Pickford and Chalobah. I've gone for a 1-0 win for Everton and Chelsea, so I'm going to sort of back my predictions there and stick with that. We have seen Haaland benched before and bought on late. Exactly, that's a good point as well. I think it's a bit different when you bench a player of the quality and goal-scoring potential of Erling Haaland, and game state plays a huge part. Thank you everyone for tuning in. If you haven't done so already, like this stream, subscribe to my channel, and there's also the notification bell, so you're always up to date on my content for both FPL and UCL Fantasy. Also share this stream around with those I love both of those fantasy formats which I cover, and I have been doing so for the past 6 years at this point. There's my Twitter, Instagram and Blue Sky, Dylan RCM. Join my Discord server for more updates on my content for FPL, UCL Fantasy, and also for a great community to be a part of. An ongoing discussion there, always discussing ideas and also giving each other inspiration for certain transfers and strategies for those fantasy formats. And also there's my Discord, well, I just said that, yeah, there's also my Spotify, and leave a 5-star review. If you are listening on Spotify, after you have listened to an episode or two, you can leave a 5-star review and it really helps us out. And you can find me on Reddit and all these different platforms. I'm pretty much everywhere at this point. But yeah, thank you very much for tuning in. And it's been a blast talking to you for the past 2 hours and a half. It has gone by so quickly. I didn't make any transfer, but that last-minute Erling Haaland bench news did change my captaincy plans, and I went for Igor Thiago in the end. Tarkowski, Defcon, clean sheet, and bonus. Yeah, spoken like a true Tarkowski captainer. Really pissed about Semenyo now. I really need Thiago to play. Says Twisted Parky. Yeah, I think Semenyo would be the standout captaincy option, but Thiago isn't too far behind there. See you, Baraf, and also to Harrison James. Big up to you and the rest of the community. And good luck, Mina, and everybody else watching. Take care, enjoy the football, and I'll see you very soon for more FPL and UCL Fantasy content. Matchday 8 will be on Wednesday, and the plan is to do a deadline stream. I'll keep you updated on that, and there will be 2 videos at least in the meantime. And for Fantasy Premier League, the aim is to do a transfer tips, best wildcard squad, and my team selection as usual, with the next deadline stream also being on the agenda. And if possible, there will be a reaction stream either tonight or tomorrow, with Saturday night being more likely there in the UK. So I'll see you then, and let's get those green arrows and the rank rises.